I call this special meeting of the Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD Board of Trustees to order at 6 p.m. on February 17th, 2022. Board members, district staff members, and members of the audience, you're free to join me in standing as Austin Burchett of the Christian Center Family Church in Farmers Branch provides a message, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Tara Bachik and the Pledge to the Texas flag led by Cassandra Hatfield.
Thank you for the honor of allowing me to be here. Let's bow our heads and pray. Lord, we thank you for today, and I thank you for all the people that are here today. Thank you for the leaders in the room. I ask that you would bless them and give them the wisdom that they need to do what is best for their district and the students that they care for. In the name of Jesus, amen. The flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome everyone tonight. Thank you for being here on this night in mid-February. It's getting cold outside, but we're glad you're here. Thank you to all my colleagues for being here tonight, and to all the district staff who are here this evening. As a district, we dedicate our efforts and resources to our goal of high expectations for all. The board uses this goal to guide all deliberations, decisions, and actions. You will get to see all deliberations, decisions, and actions of the board in open session, with the exception of some items which may be discussed in a closed session as stipulated in Texas Government Code Section 551, which is commonly known as the Open Meetings Law. These items typically deal with personnel matters, consultation with our attorney, and real estate. For the record, the board members present are Tara Herbacek, Sally Derrick, Randy Shackman, Guillermo Ramos, Cassandra Hatfield, Carolyn Benavides, and myself, Les Black. We constitute a quorum and may conduct business on behalf of the district. Excuse me. Before moving on to the next agenda item, I would like to remind you that the board will accept comments from citizens of the district and from district employees. Anyone wishing to speak either as an individual or as a representative of a group may do so during agenda item number 3, Audience for Guests. Please submit your request to do so on one of the forms provided on the table just outside the boardroom door. You may place the completed form in the box provided on that same table or present your completed form to Administrative Assistant Kim Castagnon. When the board addresses agenda item 3, Audience for Guests, you will be invited to the podium to speak to the board. So we'll move to agenda item 2, special presentations and recognitions, and items 2A, Teachers of the 9 weeks, 2B, Employees of the 9 weeks, and 2C, District Announcements. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Don Parnell.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Black, Dr. Chapman, and members of the board. Tonight we are pleased to introduce you to our teachers and employees of the 9 weeks. Congratulations to each of these individuals. And at this time, if you will please join me in watching a brief video announcing these outstanding CFB ISD employees.
Madison Arnold, Perry Middle School. Alanis Kellum, Polk Middle School. Kaylin Bell, Creekview High School. Frank Lightfoot, Early College High School. Yashina Gallardo, Ranch View High School. Ross Evans, Smith High School. Fred Wilmot, Turner High School. Elizabeth Day, Grimes Education Center. Douglas Luce, Bay Salazar Center. Jose Manzanares, Blaylock Middle School Head Custodian. Helen Kerr, Student Nutrition Manager, Long Middle School. Abel Campos, Cabling Tech Specialist. And Amy Brown, English Language Arts Specialist. Congratulations to our teachers and employees of the 9 weeks.
Also tonight, I wanted to draw your attention to the artwork at the front of our room. It's from our Kent Elementary school students. The students use watercolors, pen, and ink mediums to display their creativity, and we want to thank our Kent Cardinals for sharing their wonderful talents with us. And that concludes our recognitions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parnell. And congratulations to all our teachers and employees who've been so recognized tonight. Saw some familiar faces there, and that I was glad to see up there. And also thank you to those students from Kent for sharing your talent with us tonight. If you haven't had a chance to come up and take a closer look, I urge you to do that when you get the opportunity before you leave tonight. Our next item is 2D, update from PTA. So I will turn it over to Delia Gonzalez.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Delia Gonzalez, and I'm the treasurer of Council PTA. I am here tonight to give you a quick update in PTA and CFB. We are currently preparing to hold elections for all PTA boards in the next few months. If you or someone you know would like to serve on your local PTA board or on Council PTA board, let one of your PTA board members know as soon as possible. We would love to continue to grow our PTAs and to get new and fresh ideas from new volunteers. Please feel free to contact Kim Brady, Council President, if you have any questions, concerns, or you need to know who your local PTA board members are. As you may have heard, Council PTA is hosting the Harlem Wizards to play basketball against 25 of CFB's finest staff from all over the district this Saturday, February 19th at 6 p.m. at Turner High School. Some of our schools were able to get a special preview with the Wizards and get that excitement really going. If you haven't purchased your tickets yet, you can do so through the PTA tab on the CFB website. Nominations are now open for Outstanding Educator Awards through Texas PTA. If you know an administrator or educator who exemplifies our PTA mission to engage and empower families through meaningful connections, please nominate them for the Share the Love Award through the Texas PTA website. Finally, all PTAs will be recognizing life members at their schools and then at our district life member ceremony on April 21st at 6:30 in the new multipurpose building in Irving. We look forward to recognizing all of these amazing volunteers across the district. If you have a nomination for a life member, someone who goes above and beyond and for their community, children, or for a local PTA, please let a PTA board member or principal know. Our next Council PTA delegate meeting will be held on March the 9th at 6:30 in the ESDC building. We hope to see you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez, and thanks for all that you do. I say this every month, thanks to the PTA and all the volunteers who do work with the PTA. I say it every month that we couldn't have school without you, and it's true, so I'll just keep saying it. And I know a lot of people are excited about that basketball game coming up this weekend, so I'm sure there's going to be a big turnout. The next item on the agenda is number 3, audience for guests. Ms. Castagnan, are there any in-person requests for this item? Okay. We will then move to agenda item number 4, which are non-action items for discussion. And the first agenda item under number 4 is 4A, which is the Studer education presentation. And Dr. Chapman, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Yes, sir. You have 3 documents in front of you. You have a red folder, a tab with yellow, and then you just have a white document on top of it. So they should be all stacked on each other. These are the 3 that I want to address real quick. So the board and the cabinet addressed items in the fall to focus on 4 items that we want to really address over the 22-23 school year. And y'all recall those 4 items. And so then we started talking about, well, how can we develop a new evaluation tool to move that work and then have those accountability pieces in there. During that time, we also were talking about conducting a dashboard, building a dashboard for the Board of Trustees. So earlier, last month, you approved Decision Ed. And so we're in that process of building those, but we need to fine tune exactly what are those data points that are going to talk with all entities. What are those entities? One is the CV 2030 document. That's your 10-year strategic plan. The board approved back in 2020, April of 2020. Then it's your DIP, your district improvement plan, that is developed by a committee of stakeholders in the district. It's approved every year by the Board of Trustees in August. And then looking at those focus measures, and then any other component that we're wanting to really move into. How can we better suit the district, and is this a good tool for all? So how can we put all of those into one? So when we started to really do some research and we were looking at a survey tool, let's see how our community thinks through a survey, our students, our staff, etc. How can we move that work forward? Well, when we started to do some deep dive, we started to learn more about what this survey company, Studer, that's going to present in just a moment, what they can provide. They can do all of these things, lining our 10-year strategic plan that already exists, our survey data, the focus measures that we have, and blend all of this into one. And so then we went, okay, hold on, this might be exceptional as we move the district forward. And he'll go into how you build a culture around this for the district. So what I want to also address is back at that November board work study, we talked about the survey, and we were using the TASB template. And then when we had that conversation, we said we would come back to you with a template for tonight. Well, as we know, February 3rd board meeting was canceled due to weather, so we blended February 3rd and tonight into one. So this is part of that. But we want to make sure that we are bringing something back to the board. And so Dr. Black used the TASB model, and this is that plan that we have in front of us. So we don't want the community and or board to say, well, y'all didn't do anything and we're pushing this off. There's work that's been done, and this is the TASB model. But we do believe that we can do a lot more with this. We do believe that, as you're aware, for the last couple of years, we give you a quarterly report on our CV 2030, right, with our community. That's the red. So this is Q2, quarterly report 2, that has all 5 guiding objectives, and it has everything that we've done over this last quarter. But the valuation and the Q2 report, they're not married, right? They don't reflect each other at all. And then when you get the decision ed piece with our dashboard, that's another separate document. For us to do exceptional work, we need to bring all 4 of these documents together so that we're all on the same page, have that same vision for the next 10 years. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, and he's going to walk through what Studer can offer us as we continue to move this work forward.
Thank you,
Mr.
Dr.
Hess.
Chapman. Dr. Black, members of the board, it's a pleasure to be here. I thank you for your hospitality with a wonderful dinner beforehand as well. Dr. Chapman, as you teed up, the great work that you're doing in Carrollton-Farmers branch is quite evident. What you're pulling together with the work of the evaluation, the community input, the measures that matter most to the students and the communities that you serve, and building a system of that is what we've had the great opportunity to talk about today. I want to share a little bit more of what that can look like here in Carrollton-Farmers branch. So just by way of quick personal and organizational introduction, I'm Ryan Hess. I've been with our organization for about 8 years. Before that, I worked in 2 different school districts of about 40 to 65,000 students. I was a classroom teacher, worked in different school and district-based roles, and then my not so secret, because I've told people before, but not everyone knows, ambition is I want to be a board member in our community as well. I have great respect for what you all do in your community and really want to continue to serve my own the way that you do. So thank you personally for what you're doing here in your community. In our organization, as Dr. Chapman teed up, we have the opportunity to work with some of the best school district superintendents boards across the country who, like you, are highly committed to the communities that you serve and want to achieve, really great things for those students and families. And we work, as Dr. Chapman mentioned, pretty comprehensively with about 120 districts across the country, and the way that I'll share tonight, aligned with a couple of key frameworks that you'll see. One are these 9 principles for organizational excellence. I know as you look at these, just from conversations that I've had with Dr. Chapman and team, what I've heard of the work that you're doing already, that the alignment of your priorities, and these are really strong. Everything from the clear commitment you have to excellence to that culture of service that you mentioned that you're wanting to build and increase for all of those in your community. As you're looking at your CV 2030, and then how do we really measure what matters most,
there's a great saying in continuous improvement that we can't improve what we can't measure. And so getting clear on those success measures. You see number 7, align behaviors with goals and values. So if these are really our core values and beliefs in our organization, how do we live, work, and serve with one another in the way that's evident of those? And then, Dr. Chapman, you also spoke to that accountability aspect as you were working through the alignment of all of these things with authentic evaluations that's really, truly representative of your mission and how you're seeking to improve the district. So in this way, we work in an outsized way with leaders and thinking of boards in your governing role as part of that leadership team in that way, even as it's different from superintendent and staff, but part of the leadership of the district, and recognize the outsized role that leaders play in improving organizations, both with a focus on culture and strategy at a high level that you see there, and we also think of a through line of service that runs through all of that. So you'll kind of see how we're organized. The concepts here are really how are we achieving those things that are most strategically important, as in your CV 2030, and how are we continuing to build a great culture of service and excellence for the communities that we serve. One of the frameworks that we rely on is what you see here with this evidence-based leadership framework. So on the left of the framework is that alignment of goals, that clear alignment of measures. As you think about CV 2030, by nature, it is a 10-year strategic plan. And so as you think about annualizing and operationalizing that, part of what I'll reference is a tool that we use with districts to just do that, to take the visionary 2030 plan that you have and then to chunk that annually and to make it operational as you move throughout the work. Core to that is developing people, developing leaders to develop others. So high investment in people as you're doing already, recognizing the impact that your people make on education. You see in the centerpiece that concept of aligned behaviors or actions. So again, if these are our values, then how do we operate based on that? Also, if these are our goals and these are the things that it will take to achieve those, then the commitment to that in that way. On the far right, I think I'll just mention accelerators as a concept. Sometimes we think of initiatives or programs as being synonymous of that, things that are important, things that are good, but also if we're not careful, if we set goals around accelerators versus what we're hoping to achieve with those things, sometimes in districts we can find ourselves in kind of that initiative overload, and also where as a board member you might be asking, are we getting a return on investment for all of these programs and initiatives? And so rather than starting on the right side with the stuff, we start on the left with the clarity of what's most important to achieve, how we'll measure success, how we build the capacity of our people, and then on the right side, those things that may be accelerators that help us along the way. So here you see conceptually the multi-year strategic plan, in your case, CV 2030, and then how you annualize that. We use a balanced scorecard process as part of that framework. So you see that referenced as the district scorecard, which is a way of annualizing and operationalizing the strategic plan and also your state required district improvement plan. And then that cascades over time with school and department level scorecards as well. And that's really the backbone of the improvement approach that helps us really advance the organization with those short cycles of execution. So again, just the clear alignment to your CV 2030. To give a little bit more detail of an example conceptually of the scorecard, sometimes we think of this as, well, it might not always fit on a page. We want it to be a brief document. And so whereas that CV 2030 is a multi-year plan, this idea of an annual district scorecard is just that. It's 1 year. It's organized by those 5 pillar areas that you've defined as most significant in your district. And then there's really 3 sections underneath that. 1, a small number of key annual goals that define success at the district level. The second is lead measures, or how we know how we're progressing along the way, because the annual measures lag too much. We can't wait till the end of the year. By that point, it's too late for those that we serve to build the improvements that'll make the difference for them. And then the last section is that concept of those strategic actions, or that Pareto principle, that 80-20 rule of what are the 20% of actions or initiatives or programs we're going to be highly committed to, because we think if we do those deeply and well, it'll help us achieve 80% of our results. So one of the reasons for this, I mean, it's a great piece of research that is surprising, and yet in my own experiences I can verify it. A team with 2 improvement targets has a 93% chance of achieving success. You add just a third and it drops to 52. And I always say, show me a team with just 2 improvement targets. So that kind of speaks to the significance of the ability to focus on a few key things that are most significant at the district level, and then across your departments and across your teams. And so it's also that balanced focus on, as we're doing this work, we're providing tools and resources and development for leaders. It's both around those things that we talked about to implement your strategic plan and priorities to achieve those results that are most significant. And then also sometimes what people call the soft skills. And our founder always says, I think they call the soft skills that because they're so darn hard. These core skills that are, build a great workplace, a great place where teachers feel very connected to the reason why they first decided to become a teacher, the impact that they each want to have, whatever their role is in the school district. And this goes to that sense of stakeholder input that you want, that's highly significant to you all, that you want it to be a great place for parents to send their children, for students to come to school each day, for employees to come to work. And so there's a so-called soft skill element of this work that's very much about, how do we create that great atmosphere and environment. We use, as Dr. Chapman mentioned, a suite of stakeholder surveys. Just like you have student achievement data that's an input into the process, these surveys are an input into the process of how employees and stakeholders are feeling, and then how we take that input into action as we continue to advance the district. Lastly, or as we kind of, wrap on some of the high level, overview here, this actually, I can't take credit for this. I love this concept, but I actually took it from one of your colleagues in Texas. He's a great superintendent, now retired, from the Schertz-Cibolo Universal City Independent School District, Dr. Greg Gibson. We met him kind of later in his career, worked with him in his district probably 5 or 6 years. Wonderful superintendent board, school district there. And he actually presented this concept at one of our leadership events a few years ago. And if you think about, that axis on the left that's organizational performance, how you measure success as a school district, and on the bottom, culture and engagement and morale, how people are feeling about the organization. And I'll never forget, Greg said, I used to think if we were doing the right next best thing by kids and adults, that would just go in a diagonal line up, right? That our results would improve, our culture and morale would improve. And he said, I realized that as we're doing strategic things to advance the organization and new things, because we want new and different and better results, there will be some strain in the organization as we're learning and doing new things, and bluntly, culture takes a hit as you're doing that. So that's part of the why for the focus on culture. You want to have a great culture, but also as you're improving the organization, even if I'm a high-performing employee in your organization, part of my identity is feeling excellent, highly competent, knowing the work I do each day. If we're doing something new, I might be a little uncomfortable. What if I'm not as good at the new way as I was at this way? And so this awareness, I think, of leaders, and also for you as a board, that as you're strategically committed to making an excellent district for those you serve, that attentiveness to culture is really important, because as you're doing new things, you'll find yourself, as Greg said, in the back of that C curve in managing change throughout the organization. So in summarizing the approach, this is not a new initiative, and it's not a new concept or a new idea, but these are things that, to Dr. Chapman's point of what he iterated, of what all you have said, all of the things you listed are already on your radar and are already important to you, and are things you have or are putting on place, like you see on the left. And what this really is building an integrated system of moving those things to action in a way that work well together and not in silos as their own things to advance the district and your priorities. As I mentioned, we have the pleasure of working with a good number of districts across the country in this work. Several of them have been highlighted for their work in this way. AASA School Administrator magazine, April of 2021 of last year, had an edition focused on organizational excellence in school districts, and 4 of our partners were spotlighted for their work in this area. And then in 2019, they had one that was focused on system-wide continuous improvement. In that particular edition, I think every article was highlighting one of the districts we happen to serve, except the president of Advanced Ed had an article as well. Greg Gibson, who I mentioned, his From a System of Schools to a School System is actually that article that you see sort of in the center there as well. So it's just recognizing the commitment of people and the significance of people in the organization. Our centering on service, because we want to improve outcomes for those that we serve. And then we always say, and we think of this ourselves, that our strategy is our execution, that strategy equals execution. So while as an organization we could say, this is our strategic plan, it's actually really what we're doing. And so what this approach is all about is bringing harmony to those great ideas and concepts that you've identified as most significant, and then giving leaders good tools and resources to actually bring those to action, because the results matter, not just in terms of data, but because they're students whose outcomes and the opportunities they have in their future, are based on, what we're able to achieve together. So lastly, I would just say, it's good work. It's also hard work, but it's the right work. Because as you just focus on your constituents and your stakeholders and those you serve and your families, who many of whom are connected, it'll make such a difference in their lives and the lives of your community. So with that, I welcome any questions that you have, and again, appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Questions from board members? Mr. Shackman?
Thank you so much for being here and sharing this with us. If we were to just magically click our fingers and everything would go from here starting tomorrow, as you work through this process, can you give me a sense of what kind of time we're looking at, and how will this implement in a new school system?
Yes, absolutely. So typically we engage not in a binding way. We always serve at the board and superintendent's pleasure, but we typically look to a multi-year horizon of the work. Most organizations work with us initially in a 3-year term with a scope of work that's really designed, as we've been talking about, at a high level. A number of them then work in advanced ways kind of beyond that. And so we look to that horizon, and then we really start in close work with you, with superintendent and the cabinet, on exactly where you are. So for example, as Dr. Chapman was kind of laying out and teeing this up, you have a great strategic plan in place. You have high level goals and priorities and measures. You're planning into a new year. And I know that you want to bring good definition, not only to those goals, but those success measures of what's going to be most significant, next year. So often this time of year, we're working with superintendent team and connections with the board on what does success look like as we're getting our data for this year. So you're building that dashboard. Often when we think of like a dashboard, I mentioned the term scorecard, and people can brand that or rebrand that in different ways. But sometimes as you think about a dashboard, you might think of lots of data, right? Any data that might be significant, you pull that and you have the ability to find it. And then as we think about a scorecard, we think of that as a strategic subset of data that with thoughtfulness, people have identified as being most key for focus on in this point in time, or in this upcoming school year. And so one of the things that we work on are what's the student achievement data that we have in place. We also begin a cadence of the stakeholder survey administrations. So whether you'd want to do some of those on the back half of this year or plan into the fall for the initial administrations, and then moving annually into kind of a cycle of that. and then using that to really aligned with, that scorecard concept, wanting to be able to define success, those annual goals at the district level, with good connection with the board. And then Dr. Black, as you think about what you've put together in terms of the superintendent evaluation, this aligns, explicitly to that, right? And so this is the work that builds the specificity as it connects to that, because you want those evaluations to be really aligned to what you're actually trying to achieve as a district. And the good news is you've built good definition around that with a strategic plan. That's a multi-year scope, and so we're really working to define what it looks like in that first year. So that's part of it, getting that kind of plan on a page in that way, and then also doing moving into the stakeholder administration. And then typically we get into a cycle with the leadership team, both with cabinet and larger groups of leaders throughout the year, where we're doing a couple of things at a high level. One, you've got your district and your school improvement plans and kind of that scorecard that helps to build the agility of that. So instead of just prepping, and I'm not saying this is the current state, but we're building a structure to where with the state, you kind of comply and you do it at the beginning of the year, and then you look at it at the end of the year. So we're building quarterly cycles of how we're meeting with leaders around the data, and what you see here in the middle of those leader progress monitoring measures, where are we red, yellow, green on those measures, and then how do we do our action plan, into the next 90 days or quarter. And then also as you're getting some of that data and the stakeholder input, then we're also providing professional development to leaders that's based on the feedback and the input we're getting to build capacity for them and as a system to improve that. So we're moving into that kind of cycle of implementing the strategies and also the work around the culture and your stakeholder surveys.
Ms. Derrick.
I think this may be more of a Dr. Chapman question. I'm confused. Can you help me connect the dots on, we were presented Decision Ed, that's going to be the dashboard for all the data, but then tonight we're talking about data again, and so I think I'm confused on where did Studer come in? Like, what was their purpose in bringing them in? And then help me connect where that connects to the superintendent evaluation.
Perfect. So the initial broad of that was all about the surveys, and he had talked about that. So you have your parent survey, you got your support center survey, and you've got your staff survey. That's where that initial piece came in that we were going to bring in to the district. Then when we started having those conversations, we were like, oh my gosh, this thing's much bigger than that, because we were already moving forward with them. You've already approved them, by the way. But then we thought, man, we can do so much more with that. And so then if we take the survey, everything he's talked about, the survey data and taking our CV 2030, our DIP, the focus measures, you've already done those. So a lot of this we've already done, as you're aware. And then now having this all into one place, in one system. Now, Decision Ed is a whole nother mechanism, and that's just going to be the board's dashboard. It's going to fall into a cabinet dashboard, and then a principal dashboard, and a teacher dashboard. That's something that, we've got 6, 7 different platforms, and we're going to bring them all into one where they all talk to Decision Ed. That's a whole different piece. But for us, when we build these measures and part of that evaluation tool and the components that we want to look at and measure through here, we can bring that and join those two through Decision Ed. What is on the report, or what do you call, not the report card, what do you call it?
Scorecard.
Scorecard. On the scorecard, then on the Decision Ed side, they can all blend and be into one. You're measuring the exact same thing. And then the board, as we've been trying to get for many years, a dashboard for the board to see that in real time, we can do that now. Or we're going to be able to do that. So as we're bringing this in, this is a great opportunity for us to take what we're already doing, because again, we don't want to continue to recreate. We're already doing quarterly reports for you, and we have for the last, since the CV 2030 was adopted in April of 2020. Well, that can't go away because our community developed that, right? So we don't want that in an evaluation tool to be ignored. And so for right now, they're all just little islands. Let's bring this all into one unit to move that forward. And we want to hear from our stakeholders through the survey. Well, that's where this whole thing originally started from, if that makes sense.
And I can add too, if helpful. So we don't have a technology platform for like a dashboard type tool.
Right.
And so a number of the districts that we work with do. You don't have to, but it's really nice if you have in some cases, some of the districts we work with, when they're trying to action plan around the data that's most significant, part of the lift is locating or getting the accurate data. And so, if I understand correctly, I think what you all are doing with your dashboard is going to be that tool and system where that's more readily available. And so that will complement very well and isn't redundant to something that we do or provide in terms of that aggregation of the data from that technical aspect.
Now, the evaluation piece of that is, does Studer provide work groups with the board in order to refine this, or does that need to be done separately and then brought back to Studer?
We would work with you all collectively, on that piece. So and I appreciate what you've put together, Dr. Black, and you sharing that, Dr. Chapman. So right now, you've got a great framework, and then we'll work with you all consultatively on how to marry the framework to the CV 2030 and the annual goals that you're identifying there, and can provide recommendations and support on how to translate that into a rating tool in particular ways. And that won't be cookie cutter, that won't be us imposing a particular way, but us working with you and aligning to what you've put in place and to what you're doing, bringing those pieces together.
Yeah, so we're not going backwards on anything we've done for the last 2 years. We're using it, and now we're bringing it all together.
Okay, and then just one comment, and then I'm done. About the surveys, my comment would be that I think we need to know where we're at in order to know where we're going, and so I think the quicker we can get surveys out, the better. I know you talked about maybe waiting till next year for staff surveys, but my voice would be that the sooner the better, because we need to know where we're at. Okay, thank you. Thank you for all the information.
Yes, thank you.
Ms. Benavides.
Lights on, good. So all of this data is based on surveys taken from parents, teachers, our past, or?
This is one component.
One.
That will be one component. And so what we work on, as you think about these 5 areas that you see, which I've just pulled from your CV 2030 plan. And so it's looking at what are those key measurable goals each year that align to your 2030 plan, and the data that will help us know if we're on track in each of those 5 areas. And so in some cases, you already have a large amount of data. Like when you think about your student achievement data, a tremendous amount, and part of the challenge is what's key, what's most strategic and significant based on where we are and the needs of our kids. So it's paring down that large amount of data. And in other cases, you might not have yet identified the measure of some of these things. And so our work together would be identifying how we can measure success in some of these areas, in a tangible way. And then the surveys plug into that in the same way that the student achievement data is. So the surveys will immediately provide data that you don't have that address some of these areas like community engagement, for example, in your CV 2030 plan.
So that information is keyed into your system, and that's how you get reach our goals?
We work with you all to develop that together.
Okay.
So we won't come in and say, here's what you should do, but we'll work and learn together and look at your data and provide recommendations on the goal setting for those areas. Yes, ma'am.
So each group will input their own data, their own information, share that, whether it be the teachers or?
This would be more at the system level, and it's not necessarily a data system, but how we're working and supporting just the action planning and the implementation process. And so this would be, in terms of this scorecard concept, a annual district scorecard, an annual kind of really supporting your district improvement plan process, but making sure, to Dr. Chapman's point, that it's not CV 2030 is one thing, and then we've got the district improvement plan that's another thing, and then we're also working on a dashboard. But what is that unified set of goals that's most significant to you all, your community, your board? And then how do those tools help you? But bringing all of those things together. And then likewise, working with school and department leaders as they look at their data, what are those areas that are most significant for advancing the work in their area as well? And it's less about our work and our focus is less about entering those data points into a system and more about working with leaders and teams, almost like a PLC, a professional learning community for leaders, but working with them to actually support their action planning and implementation to achieve the results related, to each of those goals.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Ms. Hatfield?
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify, I think I'm putting the dots together now, that y'all's focus is to help us gain more traction to create a sustainable progress monitoring tool that can help us monitor that we are making the change from CV 2030.
Yes, and we're really implementation partners as well.
Right, so
Yes.
you guys are going to strategically help us. You're going to do the surveys, but then help us implement, or help the district implement action plans so that we as the board can also monitor that and see the progress more transparently, because there's a kind of a structure around it. They're
Yes.
wrapping around it.
Yes. So this structure is going to support exactly what you're doing and wanting to continue to do in terms of those quarterly reports you're getting.
Mhm.
It's going to bring clarity around all of those different plans and pieces and goals. And so bring the robustness into those reports. So as you think about, where you'll be soon planning into next year, coming together as superintendent, leadership team, and board with the clarity around, what are our key success measures aligned to our district, level priorities. And then the quarterly reports will show, progress, how are we doing, trending, relative to that. And then the work with superintendent, staff, and teams is really in what you see as that last section. Not that the board's not involved, but less involved on the day-to-day. What are those strategies we're putting into place, and how are we moving forward with those? Because we think that if we do those things well, those few key things well, it'll help us achieve results. So what you see quarterly and annually will be, what you're wanting to see. So it's the monitoring piece, but it's actually, the partner in the implementation. And then the monitoring is a byproduct of that, but an important one to keep the board informed.
Okay, great. My one other question was about the survey rollout, and so you guys will support in the structuring of that as a third party?
Yes.
To ensure, and then it looks like with the action planning process, the staff will know that they're being heard and those results are going to be utilized.
Yes,
through
really
this process.
important. So we always say, sometimes people, and you should, right? I mean, you should have a good survey tool. Sometimes people spend a lot of money on a survey tool, and then they collect the data, and then people don't know what happens to the data. It'd be better to have not so expensive a survey tool and do something really good with the data, or best to have a really good tool and a good process. So we have a very good tool. We're also, we're researchers, but we're practitioners too. And so one of the key things that we do, and part of the leadership development, is when we get this data back, what do we do with it? How do we communicate back with it? And so we'll do leadership development around, for example, the employee engagement survey. If I'm a principal and I get these results back, this is the feedback that faculty and staff have provided, about our work culture and environment. And there's vulnerability in doing it. So the first time you do it, it'll be good, it'll be fine, but it's not so easy the first time you do it. We'll all get much more comfortable and better at it. And so we're putting in place a system and a process for that, and then developing leaders, and they'll actually role play and practice that kind of thing as well, because these are things we haven't done before. And it would, just like teachers, right? If we were, asking them to do something new, a new curriculum, we'd provide development and tools for them. And so similarly here.
Thank you.
Mr. Ramos?
Could you
pull up that slide? It has the XY axis with organizational performance and staff morale.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I guess I'm in line with Ms. Hatfield and Ms. Derrick with regarding the surveys, because I'm sure that's would be help even out in that line, because I don't know, it kind of concerns me when I see that, especially right now with the times we're going through right now. I mean, I know there's a lot of superintendents that are just resigning, teachers are resigning, and so keeping staff morale, evening out, flattening out that curve, kind of concerns me. And I know this is done for demonstrative purposes, but that's not really the way it is, correct? Or help me.
Sure, it's an example. Now the reality is you're likely somewhere in the back of that curve right now, right? So we kind of have a saying of, either we create our culture or it creates itself. So when the benefit of surveying in an annual cadence and then working with leaders around, good practices related to that is we're building the culture we want aligned to our values in the district. When we don't do that, then it's, we have a culture, but it just hasn't been intentionally created. And then your point is incredibly important, because it's not just change in the district that you all may choose, because it's important to make improvements at key times to improve outcomes for kids. It's also external changes that are occurring, right? So we're undoubtedly in the back of the C-curve, if for no other reason than this has been probably the most challenging time in not just education, but in most people's lives that they've ever been in. So our ability to, as a system, provide structures that's focused around culture and engagement and support, and as leaders to be responsive to that. And I say as a system because the system provides the tools and resources for leaders or not, right? And then, leaders organically figure it out or they don't, but we want a system that does. And so most of us across the country are really probably in the back of that curve right now, just as a casualty of our circumstances.
So I guess I reiterate that part about the survey so that we make them, the employees of teachers, everybody feel like they're being heard to help flatten out that curve as much as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. So the surveys are really important, and then the work we'll do with leaders will be really significant as well, because then they'll have those good conversations about the input they provided. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
And that time is of the essence.
Yeah. Thank you.
Are there further comments or questions from board members? Dr. Chapman, do you have anything to add at this point? I would just say to my colleagues on the board that Dr. Chapman and I have been working on this document, and you'll see that part 2 of the document includes the goals that we collectively reached at our work study meeting, I believe in October, and they're aligned. I worked to try to align them to our strategic priorities, to whichever priority each goal aligned to. Some of them overlapped and aligned to multiple goals, but section 3 is really still needs input from the board, and we need to talk about, because it really still does sort of reflect the template that TASB has, and it's not customized in any way to the needs of the district. And so, one way or the other, whether we work through this with Studer or we work through it on our own, as Ms. Derrick says, time is of the essence. We need to bring it to completion as soon as possible. So with that, if Studer can help facilitate that process, then that would be a good thing, I think. So with that, I would thank you for your presentation and the information. And if there are no further comments or questions, I'll let him stand down. Thank you very much. So that brings us to agenda item 4B, which is a budget update. So this is Mr. Guerra. Oh, there you are.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Black. Dr. Chapman. And the green binder is the presentation tonight, if you want to pull that out. So, as you know, our fiscal year ended August 31st of last year, and our financial audit is finally complete. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm happy to remind everyone that we did have a clean audit this year, and it was, like I said, not for lack of digging on the auditor's report. So we did have a clean audit with 0 findings, and that's good for the district. So, as you know, now that our year started, we're about halfway through, 5.5 months through our year. So I just wanted to talk to a few finance things that we looked through as a department during the year. So TEA recommends that we normally have 2.5 to 3 months of fund balance of operating expenses in our fund balance. And as you can see, a positive that we have is we have 4+ months of fund balance in our reserves. Another thing I'll be talking about tonight is our outstanding debt profile and how good our tax rate is compared to our peers here locally. So another thing we have is our AA+ rating, which is a really positive for the district. That's how we're rated through the state, and that's how they grade us on our first rating report, which is the TEA's financial transparency report we have as a finance department. So it also helps us when we get our bonds. They give us the better rates if we have AA+ rating, so it does help the district, and we do have a current AA+ rating. Some of the challenges I'll be talking through tonight is our formula transition grant, which is set to expire after the 23-24 school year. And I'll also talk about the needs we have when we start thinking about as a district of the campuses that weren't addressed in the 2018 bond and how we have to take that into account moving forward. So the first slide I'll show you is our overall tax rate and how it compares locally to districts in our area. Currently we have a total tax rate of $1.20, just over $1, and you can see we're the third lowest of all the districts in our area, which is really good for us as a district. You can see here, this is our historical tax rate over the last 10 years. You can see we were about $1.35 10 years ago, and it did peak around 2018, and that's when House Bill 3 hit, which compressed the tax rate and lowered it, so that gets us to the current state of just over $1.20. And the total tax rate of $1.20 is actually broken into 2 parts, as y'all may know. There's the general fund tax rate, which is just a hair over $1, and our debt service tax rate fund, which is our interest and sinking fund, which is 20 cents. The INS fund, the interest and sinking fund, is what we use to pay our bond debt. That's the only thing it can be used for, is principal and interest. The general fund, the maintenance and operations side, is how we do our day-to-day operations as a district. That's how we pay teacher salaries and all our bills and things of that nature. So the formula transition grant that I talked about was created kind of as a hold harmless for districts after they started compressing their rate through the House Bill 3 legislation. And what it did was it guaranteed districts who were going to lose money an increase in our funding. So what it did, Carrollton-Farmers branch was one of 264 districts in the state that were to receive the FTG funding. And again, what it did was it helped the district. I think last year we had a little over $26 million in our FTG grant. And this year they've started with new legislation that just passed. They actually lowered it to 11.9 is what we're looking at this year. And again, what we have to prepare for and what we're conscious of as a business office is that we know it's expiring after 23-24 school year, so we have to be prepared to see that loss in funding. So this was a slide that we showed you last time that kind of when the state was doing their budget update, they kind of were, prepping districts and people across the state to say, hey, we're going to have this giant shortfall. And it was almost $5 billion that they were saying. And then about halfway through the year, you can see they lowered it down to their deficit showing about $1.67 billion. And that's what we were basing it off. So it kind of makes districts a little leery of what's going to happen with us. I know they raised the basic allotment, so it was a concern for the district. But in just the last couple of months, they've seen a drastic turnaround. And now they don't even think we're going to have, they don't think they're going to have a deficit at all. They're planning for a $725 million surplus, which, what does that mean for us? It means probably they're not going to mess with the basic allotment. So it's good news for the state and good news for the districts in the state. So this is a slide showing all the outstanding debt we have, and currently we have an existing amount of $374 million of the $570 million that was outstanding debt. So we've already paid off $200 million. And you can see how in the next 5 years we'll have 37% more of that debt paid off, and within 10 years we'll have more than half of the debt paid off. And that's the way we had it structured. So a lot of that is callable, so we can refund it if we need to lower the rates and to get it paid off quickly. And you can see how the debt service requirements are set up. In the next couple of years, it is high because we just took out the last piece of the bond, the 2018 bond. But you can see the sharp decline over the next few years, and all the interest is going to be taken care of, and it's just principal, and you can see how low it is and how it drastically goes down. So what I did here is we have our debt ratio comparison compared to with our local peers, and what it is the debt rate compared to what our tax collections are, and you can see we're less than 1%, and you can see all the districts here in our area are much higher than we are, so that it really sets up well for the district moving forward when we want to take out our next bond. And this next slide shows not just districts in our area, but districts that are similar size throughout the state. And you can see we are one of the lowest debt to income ratios that we have throughout the whole state. And again, of the 2018 bond that we passed, we just recently sold the last bond, portion of the bond. It was $350 million, and the last portion that was taken out was $234 million. That was done in April of 21. So there's no more remaining amount on the last bond that we sold in 2018. So the important thing to look at is when we sell the bonds that we want them to mature more quickly than the useful life of our assets. So what that means is, like, we don't want to be paying bond and interest payments when the asset is useless. So you can see the weighted average for maturity of our debt is 12.3 years, and the longevity of the assets, the useful life, is 22.5 years. So it's a really positive thing for the district as well. So when we start thinking about bond issue and tax rate scenarios, we do sit down with our financial advisors, and we try to be as conservative as possible. And even though the property value growth is more significant, we tend to be more conservative. So you can see, starting in 23, for the next 3 years, we lower the property value assumptions by down to 5%. And even 3 years after that, then for the next 3 years, we lower it to 3%. And then just for forecasting, we actually do 0% growth, and that leaves us as conservative as possible in maintaining our 20-cent tax rate. So this is just kind of a graph that shows that the green line on the very top shows our 20-cent tax rate, and you can see that those first few years are the assumptions of 5% and then 3%, and then we actually level it off after that. So that's why the green line stays consistent. And that's assuming no property tax growth. The blue line is our current tax rate. It kind of mirrors the other image I showed you where the rate drops significantly. You can see the blue line, it goes down significantly, and it's when we start to pay off debt. So we just put a scenario in there, was the brown line in the middle, which kind of shows if we do sell bonds that we're still well under the anticipated tax rate of 20 cents, which means if we do sell bonds, we can sell them, gosh, anywhere from, what do we talk, from $400 to $700 million without having to raise the tax rate of 20 cents. So, and I can tell you, like in my previous district, our tax rate was 50 cents. So at 20 cents, Carrollton-Farmers branches are really, really low compared to everybody, even statewide. So in this last slide just kind of shows what we feel the tax requirements would be based on these conservative assumptions, that if we do 20 cents this year, we can drop down. So it stays hovering where we want it to be between 10 to 13 cents, which keeps us under the 20-cent valuation. So if there's any questions on the presentation, I'll show them to you.
Ms. Derrick.
That was a great presentation. Thank you. Super clear. I have one question about the last slide.
Okay.
The projected tax rates, is that assuming we don't do the bond that you referred to in the page before, or that's with?
No, that's with the bond assumptions.
That's with, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Mr. Shackman.
Mr. Gura, thank you for the excellent information. Tagging off of Ms. Derrick's question,
Yes, sir.
if we are assuming in bonds, at what level? Because at one point you said, 400 million and 700. What's the number factored in here?
It was up to 700 million.
Okay.
Is what we factored in.
So that would be potentially with clear up to the top number.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's correct.
Mr. Bocek?
But that final amount would be developed through a process similar to how we did in developing community input, what we want with staff, what we need. So that's not a final amount
Oh, no, no.
right now.
no.
That's
ju-
estimate,
Yeah,
that's
that's
for
just an estimate
projections.
on what it would be without raising the tax rate. And so, and Malcolm will address this next month on March 3rd about Huckabee and the work that they're doing, developing that 2023 bond. And so how much money will that entail? So there'll be a lot more information, but yes, it'll be community driven. It'll be through the assessments, our master plans, such as Turner, where we did,
Right.
some, we want more. And then that'll all be developed. The great thing is it can go upwards of that 700 million, and we're not going to need that much money. And so we're just in a great position and not having to raise a tax rate.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, this
Yes.
was for financial projections, that nothing has been finalized
No,
with
no, no,
regards
no.
to a bond, what would be included, the amount, or anything.
Months and months and months of conversations.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bocek. Any other questions, comments from board members?
He was going to, one more thing.
Yeah, also in the packet, I put the budget calendar that we'd have as a business office that we work, closely with curriculum, we work closely with Human Resources Department to set deadlines and set parameters, how we go about through our entire year. Like I said, the budget process really starts as soon as the year starts. We start angling for the next year and preparing for the next year, and you can see some of the deadlines and some of the upcoming stuff that we have for the budget calendar. So if you had any questions on the calendar, I'll take them as well.
Any questions for Mr. Guerra on the calendar? I see no questions, but thank you for this. This
Yes, sir.
definitely helps. Thank you very much, Mr. Guerra. Whoops. Okay, this brings us to 4C, our December end of course results. And so, Dr. Parker, this is you.
Thank you. Good evening. Tonight we're going to be presenting information on our STAR end of course results, and that's the most recent administration of state testing. Joining us tonight is Hope Keene, coordinator of state testing. She comes to our team. This is her first year with the assessment and accountability team. She comes with over 10 years of experience here in Carrollton-Farmers branch, experience as a campus administrator as well as an at-risk coordinator. Within her role as a district testing coordinator, she's responsible for the administration of all state and national exams given here in Carrollton-Farmers branch. So, excuse me, before we go much further, copies of your slides are below the light blue handout tonight. In addition to earning high school course credit, students must also demonstrate academic proficiency on 5 end-of-course exams. Although algebra is administered to many of our students in middle school, algebra, biology, and English 1 are commonly administered for the first time to our 9th graders. The English 2 end-of-course exam is typically given to 10th grade, followed by U.S. history in 11th grade. Most students test for the very first time during the spring semester of state testing, and that occurs in the month of April and May. Those who are absent or who did not meet grade level proficiency have another opportunity to test during the summer in the month of June, followed by winter or fall testing in December. We're going to begin tonight's presentation looking first at the demographic profile of our December EOC test takers. For the most part, the student profile by ethnicity is close to the district's enrollment patterns. We did have a slightly higher Hispanic student testing population testing back in December. Our emergent bilingual English language learners comprised 49% of test takers in December, and students served by the special education program represented 19% of the test takers. Looking now at the participation rate, this is the percent of eligible students who took an end-of-course test and exam in December. The state's data is on the left, and our district is on the right. 3 years of information is presented side by side. Now, you'll note here that on the participation rate, TA has not yet released the statewide summer reports on their website. I spoke to them this morning. They anticipate having that within the next 1 to 2 weeks. So we're not able to share where their participation rate was this past administration, but we should have that information soon. Prior to COVID, we can see that the participation rate was high across the state and in our district. 92% of eligible test takers in Texas took the exam in December of 2019. In CFB, 87% of eligible test takers participated. And then in December of 2020, participation rates dropped as students were required to test in person regardless of their instructional setting. And if we recall at that point in time, approximately 50% of our high school students were categorized as remote learners at that time. Now, during the most recent administration of the end-of-course test, 82% of eligible students in CFB took the exam. Historically, our December EOC administration is largely comprised of retesters. The chart on the left shows that in 2019, only 18% of students taking a December end-of-course test were first-time test takers overall in the state. In CFB, first-time test takers comprised only 5% of the exams back in 2019. Then, in December 2020, a much higher percentage of test takers were taking the test for the very first time across the state and in Carrollton-Farmers branch. This increase was due to COVID and the cancellation of 2 administrations of the end-of-course test. Our students didn't have an opportunity to test in the spring of 2020, nor during the summer. Fewer first-time test takers actually participated in this latest round of December end-of-course test. Only 20% of students taking an end-of-course test in our district were identified as first-time test takers. And we can see here that retesters comprised 80%. Basically, it's beginning to look a little bit more like things were occurring before COVID. Now, the chart you're seeing here on this slide is the exact same chart that you saw on the previous slide, but next to it is a table with the count of retesters for each of the end-of-course subject areas that were tested. We can see the 2019 column, that very first column of 2019, this was pre-COVID. The 2020 column was our school year 1 with COVID, our first year, experiencing instruction and testing amidst a pandemic. And then we're currently in school year 2 with COVID. And that's represented in column 2021, showing that a higher number of students are beginning to test again. Here's similar information regarding our first-time test takers. Once again, nearly half of the students testing in December 2020 were first-time test takers in our district. And that's very, very similar to other students across Texas. On the left, this year, only 20% of our December EOC participants were testing in the subject area for the very first time. And at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Hope Keene. She's going to share more details about the end-of-course performance listed by each of the subject areas.
Good evening, Dr. Chapman, Dr. Black, members of the board. I am Hope Keene, your very proud district testing coordinator. As we look through the assessment-specific data that we have here before you, it's worth mentioning that the state's new vendor provides the approaches, meets, and masters data differently than what you may be used to in the past. So historically, we would see the percentage of students at approaches grade level and above. You'll see that they've moved to now reporting data with a concise value for each of these achievement categories. So in biology, 23% of test takers scored approaches grade level, 4% scored meets grade level, and 1% scored masters. That's the combined 28% that we see of students who met the passing standard. So looking at the chart on the right, when compared to 2020, the performance rate for the state dropped 9% points and 2% points in CFB. Continuing to keep in mind that our students testing last December also included students who missed their first testing opportunity, typically given in May. So when we compare the performance rate to December 2019, which is more reflective of our December testers, we see that CFB actually saw an increase of 2%, while the state saw a decrease. As we're looking at our Algebra 1 results, our December EOC scores were slightly lower than the previous year. Again, remembering that we had a large increase in December testers due to the missed first-time testing opportunity in spring and June of 2020. Next are the English 1 results. Similar to algebra and biology, English 1 is commonly administered to our students during their freshman year of high school. And when comparing that data to the 2019 set, we see that the state saw a slight decrease of 3 percentage points, and we matched our performance rate from December 2020 and had a slight increase over our 2019 end of course exams. Our English 2 test takers reflect a similar trend to the state, and while we experienced a 3% decrease from the prior year, we are 6% higher when compared to our 2019 December test takers. So you'll see that in 2021, we had 24% of students, while in 2019, we had 18% of students meet the passing standard. And then lastly, looking at U.S. history results with a December passing rate of 40% for our CFB testers. Again, we see an 8% increase over the 2019 December testers, which shows an improved performance when compared with the state data, who actually saw a 6% decrease from the 2019 data. So this trend suggests that we are beginning to gain traction, and as Dr. Parker shared at the beginning of tonight's presentation, 80% of December EOC test takers in CFB were retesters, many of whom are just now finally able to retest after being able to be back in the classroom. So taking a moment to look ahead at our upcoming state testing opportunities, we concluded today actually our standalone field testing opportunity, and that was assigned by the state. They selected our campuses here in CFB to take on different assessments according to grade level. And our campuses have been able to experience the new testing platform while also experiencing new question types that will be used in the 2023 testing season. TELPAS is also underway with collecting writing samples, and the reading, listening, and speaking assessments begin next week online. And our TELPAS Alt and Star Alt 2 begin in March, which will then take us into April with our English 1 and 2 EOCs, and then right on into May with our big May testing season that I am very excited about. Thank you for your time, and I'll hand this back over to Dr. Parker as she shares the next steps for our students.
Thank you, Hope. So as we look here and looking at data to action, really what are our next steps? What are we doing to prepare and get ready for that next round of testing that Hope shared is occurring in April and May? We know that STAR test scores help us identify areas of improvement, but having data is just a starting point. We know that it's going to take time for our students to make gains in their learning. Listed here are a number of items described in terms of the curriculum, assessment, instructional, and social emotional learning support that we're providing to our secondary students. Imagine Math is an online learning program for high school math. It is now in place for all students who will take the algebra test this spring. Not only that, it includes a pathway to support 2 of our CCMR assessments, the SAT exam, as well as the TSI 2.0 AccuPlacer. Our content area teams have identified essential standards within their scope and sequence and have based them on the targeted areas. We've also expanded MAP testing into high school grades and provide opportunities for students to develop their skills through some online TEA practice tests. Most of our students do take this exam online. We've also aligned our assessment system through district common formative assessments to ensure that the data that we collect throughout the year gives us information we need to monitor the students' progress and advance student achievement. This year, ESSER funds have been a tremendous support. It has provided additional teachers, it's provided literacy coaches, as well as more counselors, allowing for classroom instructional support as well as meeting the social-emotional needs of our students. Lastly, through professional learning communities, we are building teacher capacity in analyzing student work. Combined with grad team meetings, we're providing avenues that we feel are going to help our campus and district leaders know their students by name as well as need. And that concludes our presentation this evening on the December and, of course, exam. Any questions?
Are there questions for Dr. Parker or Ms. Keene? Mr. Bocek.
Thank you both. I don't know if I'd be that excited about testing, but I appreciate your passion because it's what's best for our students. And you mentioned the ESSER funding and the additional support that we have in our schools throughout all of our schools, not just the secondary schools. But so these scores were released in December, and so if these students, either first time or retesters weren't identified in some other way as needing that extra little love or support or attention on those, they are now included for that extra, the support from those ESSER
Exactly,
teachers.
and yes, that's correct. And if not through ESSER teachers, then definitely through the literacy coaches and some of the specialists. As soon as the test was given in December, we received the results in mid-January, and within a week, the content area teams, the specialists, the coaches were already disaggregating, looking at the data, identifying the students and the next steps and the next needs to take it, getting them ready for the next round of testing for those that are going to be administered the exam in either April or in May.
Okay, so I guess I just want to make sure that, things are such in flux that we're not, we're capturing those that need the help and we're not missing them. And, we're bringing them in for that support.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's what we're doing.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ms. Derrick.
Dr. Parker, will you remind me again, which column are we using as our benchmark of where we're trying to get everybody to?
Excellent. So if we will, I'm going to ask everybody to take a few minutes to let's take a look at the biology slide was the first piece of data that we looked at, and the biology slide is on slide 9 for the December EOC results for biology. The table is, of course, on the left, and as Hope or Ms. Keene shared, we used to combine everything as approaches grade level and above, meets, and above masters. The state has set the passing standard at approaches grade level or above.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Ms. Benavides, did you have a comment or question?
You spoke of the emotional learning. Is it additional counseling to the children? Action next steps?
I'm not going to say that as a student that took an EOC exam is going to get extra counseling. We know that COVID has really interrupted our lives, and not just with testing. It's just education. So the fact that we have additional counselors on our campuses are going to make a difference in helping our students feel successful in the classroom and moving forward. That's the point is without that and without some of the support and resources from Joe Gillen's team, I'm just grateful for that work and wanted to recognize that that is a part of the whole child in terms of the learning experiences that they're having.
So the impact that you're seeing is positive? It's really lifting the children up?
It does. It really does. I think that our students are getting the support that they need beyond just tutoring.
Thank you.
Mr. Bocek.
I want to add one more thing, because as we all know, the STAR test is a snapshot in time, one day, one bad morning, one, a horrible ride to school or something. This is a snapshot. This does not reflect the student or our teachers in any way from that. It need to look at the whole child and the whole body of their work from the academic side. So,
100% agree.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Hatfield?
I was going to refrain, but then do we know or can we identify, it's probably not here because I know it's not in this report, how many of these are double and triple and quadruple dippers, like the kids that didn't pass all of these tests?
Yes, we do track that, and we do work with the campuses in identifying those students as well as any of the kids that are getting close to graduation.
Okay, thank you.
We'll practice wait time for a moment. Any other questions, comments? Dr. Parker, Ms. Keene, thank you very much for the information. It's appreciated. We will turn now to agenda item 4D, which is a report on significant disproportionality, and this is Dr. West.
So use your page down right here. Page down, page down. Goes back and forth. Okay, page down. There you go.
Good evening, Dr. Chapman, Dr. Black, members of the school board. I'm Randy Wells. I serve as Executive Director of Special Education. I'm here to share information with you regarding significant disproportionality, along with Dr. Patty Parker and Dr. Dana West, our Associate Superintendent. During the 2019-2020 school year, as well as 2020 and 2021 school year, CFB was cited by TEA in the results-driven accountability report, the RDA report, to have significant disproportionality of discipline of African American students served by special education. The removal rate was based on in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, and DAEP placements. The information on this slide is from the 18-19 school year. It illustrates that African American students comprise 17% of the district's overall enrollment, but accounted for 33% of the district's in-school suspensions, out-of-school suspensions, and DAEP placements. And please note that this slide includes all students, including students with and without disabilities. Because we were cited, the state has requirements that we have to follow. The first is to review policies, procedures, and practices to ensure compliance, to conduct a needs assessment and a root cause analysis, to set aside 15% of the IDEA grant, that's the federal grant, the Individuals Disabilities Education Act that we apply for every year, for CCEIS funds, and that stands for Comprehensive Coordinated Early Intervention Services, to provide early intervention and address factors contributing to significant disproportionality. And also in our department of special education, we are following data on an identified group of cohorts of students in relation to discipline over a 3-year period, and to report the designation and revisions to discipline protocols to the public. Our first step was to gather a group of staff from across the district to look at qualitative and quantitative data and conduct a root cause analysis and identify the root causes of the problem. The data revealed our biggest area of concern were on secondary campuses. In November of 2019, we created a committee with a representative from each secondary campus to develop a plan of action. After considering different approaches, the committee decided to employ restorative practices to improve discipline. Restorative practices promote inclusiveness, relationship building, and problem solving through restorative methods. All the middle school and high school campuses created a restorative site team to analyze, review, and monitor discipline data and practices. In the spring of 2021, CFB used those CCEIS funds to create a restorative center on each secondary campus. And the center in the photo here is from Creekview High School. The funds were also used to hire and train restorative interventionists for each center. Training was also provided for additional staff on restorative practices, emphasizing building positive relationships with students. The district hired Dr. McLeod to provide professional development to all staff on culturally responsive teaching. In the fall of 2021, the results-driven accountability report indicated that CFB was not cited for significant disproportionality in discipline removal of African American students served by special education. However, we are continuing our work with restorative practices to reduce the removal rate for all students in the classroom. Dr. Parker is going to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wells. As she mentioned, we came together and created an action plan, and the strategic action plan is going to take us forward for the next 3 years. So I'd like to share a little bit of information of where we were and where we're going. To achieve racial and ethnic parity in discipline, the first thing we did is we looked at overall removal rate for all students across CFB. A review of the discipline data revealed that a large majority of the removals from the classroom stemmed from code of conduct violations. Now, a common code of conduct violation or behavior were things such as dress code, it would be skipping class, and other similar actions in which students are not in compliance. The district's code of conduct disciplinary framework was then reviewed and updated to include the proactive interventions that were based on the restorative practices and the social-emotional training that our staff has gone through for the last 2 years. In 2019-20, we established a significant disproportionate action plan, and we created what's known as a strategic goal. And our strategic goal is to reduce discretionary removal for all students by 10 percentage points annually. We saw a slight drop the very first year of implementation in 2019-20, and a larger drop in classroom removals during the 2020-21 school year. Now, the action plan that was created and begun in 2019-20 also addressed the need to reduce the total discipline removal rates for our students that are served by the special education program. Currently, 13% of students are identified as special education learners. The district's strategic goal is to reduce the removal rates for SPED students by 5 percentage points annually. And you'll see that in 2020-21, we are very close to meeting that strategic goal. Now, our data to action, our next steps to help move us forward on our goal is that campus site teams continue to meet monthly to analyze, review, support, and monitor their discipline practices. We've provided training on data reporting and tracking, plus culturally responsive teaching practices continue to be ongoing. As a matter of fact, Dr. McLeod will be with us tomorrow during our professional development day, working with for middle school, elementary, as well as high school professional staff. To ensure consistency, equity, and fairness to all students referred, we've developed a discipline review and notification process. In addition, as Ms. Wells stated beforehand, the SPED department is addressing TEA's needs assistance, citing through the monitoring of a select cohort of students, which will help us in reducing our total discipline removal rates for our SPED students. Lastly, Randy Wells, Executive Director of Special Education, collaborates with other districts in Region 10 and 11 who are also cited for significant disproportionality, where they share ideas and develop strategies to address the discipline removal rate. We are not alone in this boat. Identifying areas of disproportionate discipline in special education is still a relatively new reported area for Texas. It was only first introduced during the 2018-19 school year, during the fall semester. I'll turn it over now to Dr. West.
You are already familiar with the 5 that drive. Note that professional learning communities are at the foundation of our graphic. The 3 big ideas in a professional learning community are learning, collaboration, and results. While we were relieved that we were no longer cited for being significant disproportionality, We also knew, and we know, that we are committed to getting even better results for our students. Restorative practices is an important pillar in the support of our high expectations for all. Restorative practices include the use of informal and formal processes that precede wrongdoing. Restorative practices proactively build relationships and a sense of community as a way to prevent conflict and wrongdoing. You can see this continuum of restorative practice. It's a great visual for what we are working toward. More on the informal and proactive attention on teaching and recognizing prosocial behaviors, and less on the formal side, or less on the after the acceptable behavior has occurred and there is a need to repair harm kinds of conferences. Restorative practices ensure that there are consequences for misbehavior. The consequences match the level of behavior, and they also teach our students how to handle the situations or how to make better choices in the future when confronted with conflict. An important part of this teaching is the student's opportunity to repair harm when and if harm is done. A large team of adults that included representatives from special education, counseling, mental health, accountability and assessment, finance, student services, our chiefs and assistant superintendents, and I met monthly for the last year and a half. The professional learning community team has learned and collaborated with a desire to support our campuses. A huge debt of gratitude goes to our campus leadership teams and our teachers as they tried new approaches to working with our students, especially in the midst of a pandemic, where reteaching, relearning, and supporting our students and our families in crisis was, or should I say is, more critical than ever. But we aren't done. Maya Angelou's quote highlights our efforts. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Restorative practices training and support will continue for everyone that interacts with our students. Together we rise. Our proactive attention towards teaching and recognizing prosocial behavior is already moving our data in a positive direction. We know that we still have work to do and more to go. Thank you all for your continued support.
Thank you. Are there questions, comments from the board? Ms. Urbacek.
So these percentages are 2020 and 2021. So of course, we're into 2021 and 2022 school year. And while the removal percentages, might be going down, does this equate to improved behavior in our schools? And I already know the answer to this. I want to hear about it for everybody.
It is a work in progress. And what I mean by that is the rates going down is about us working with our students and our adult staff on making sure that the consequences match the behavior. And as we mentioned earlier, with the people that we have on staff, with our restorative interventionists, our counselors, all of those folks, we still have the behaviors, but what we're doing is we're trying to not only proactively work with those behaviors and work with kids so that they have better behavior, but we are also trying to make sure that we're teaching our student, or our teachers and our other staff so that they can appropriately deal with students so that everybody can stay calm. We still have the behavior. We're trying to work on dealing with the behaviors in a different way.
Okay, so are we monitoring, those that have had a behavior concern or behavior issue or something that gets them into this, going through valuable valuable things, and then what happens at a repeat? I mean,
Yes.
what's the process? I mean, when is when do we stop that part and try another tactic because the result is what we need is improved behavior.
Absolutely. And let me explain it this way. There's going to be a consequence for every behavior. The consequences are different. It might be that the consequence is, and it goes back to that chart that I just showed a moment ago. Sometimes the consequences, those small things, those behaviors that we're dealing with in classrooms that our teachers are struggling with a lot right now, kids in crisis, crying, upset, doing things that make it hard to teach. And those are being worked on in a lot of informal ways, with working with the teacher or including a positive behavior support facilitator or bringing in one of our counselors. Those kinds of things. Those are our ways that we deal with things and have consequences. All the way to the other end. You might still end up your consequence might still end up being in an in-school suspension type setting or out of school or a DAEP, but we don't just, but we want to make sure that whatever that consequence is, that we also provide that support, those counselors, those positive behavior support people, interventionists, that we have the students repair harm and then return to the campus so that they're ready to learn. And then back to what you just mentioned about repeat behaviors, we can't have repeat behaviors. We're working on not having repeat behaviors.
Okay. I just, my expectation is that our teachers feel safe in their classrooms and that the other students in the classrooms are not disrupted by others' behaviors to interrupt their learning, and that our students feel safe. And in some cases, I just don't think we're there.
Yep, absolutely. And I agree with you. We all agree with you. We know that in order for teachers to be able to teach, that they have to have the students that are there and ready to learn. And that's exactly what we want.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Derrick?
I want to piggyback off Ms. Hrabaczyk. Staffing related to all this. This is a huge shift in response to children, and I don't disagree with it because I think that our social emotional needs of our children need to be met, and just throwing them out of a classroom is not necessarily addressing the real issue. But if we're putting one restorative interventionist at each campus and you've got 2,000 kids at a high school, that's a lot to manage. And so are we looking at maybe our staffing needs to be adjusted? I don't see how one adult that's their primary focus can manage. There's probably more than one incident happening at a time. And this goes into, so now the classroom teacher becomes the restorative interventionist. So are we needing to do more as a district to staff for this new shift in response?
I'll answer that with two ways. Yes, we are definitely looking at the staffing and the support that the students need, and that's a conversation that I'm having with Dr. Chapman and others. The other thing that through our professional development and the fact that one of our pillars is restorative practices, it's not just the restorative interventionist or just the positive behavior facilitator's job to make sure that our students know how to behave. It is all of us hand in hand, all the way from those affective statements to those formal conferences and the different levels that happen along there. The support that we need now is just to continue to train and teach our teachers so that they know what kinds of tools that they have at their disposal, what kinds of things that they do, and when it becomes to the next level, who they pass off to so that we can take it and what we do their next place. Because we want our teachers to focus on teaching our students and the students that are there ready to learn.
Exactly. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hatfield?
Thank you. So just to piggyback off of that and what you said with the professional development, I think that leads to, if since this is one of the pillars, the highest quality of professional development and resources being poured into ensuring that our teachers feel safe and also feel confident in being able to use these restorative practices. So I just continue to encourage us to make sure that we are providing the highest quality of professional development. One of the questions I had was about the removal rates on slides 7 and 8. Did the state alter how they were measuring that based on the fact that 50% of our kids were remote?
No, they didn't put any differences in that calculation.
So
So as
do
we
we
look at
think-
this information on slide 7, this is the removal rate based on the violation of student code of conduct.
So the percent is based on the part out of the total students, even though some were remote.
Correct. And also, if we take a look at 2019-20, that is for the time the students were in attendance. So we did start to see a beginning of traction at that point in time. And then 2021 is across our district.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Benavides?
So thinking about this system and the children get in trouble and go there, what is the parents' involvement? Because obviously this kind of behavior just doesn't happen because Susie's hair was bad. It's got to stem down from other COVID, everything that we're up against as a community. So thinking in that lines, being proactive, how do the children receive training to be able to cope with that prior to being in trouble? So, I'm going to think twice because I don't want to go here. I need that. It's encouraging. It'll help me. But if we're just waiting until, pow, they're in trouble, what are the steps prior to that, or what can we do to help them?
Right, absolutely. We don't want to wait until somebody's in trouble, and that is part of why this restorative practices training is so important for all of us, because not everybody jumps right out there to do something big to get in trouble. It starts off with little things sometimes, and so that's when teachers are involved, and our teachers are very good about contacting our parents. And then it is an expectation if a student moves on to the next level. You were asking about how parents are involved. That it's also an expectation that if students go to the office, that parents are a part of the contact and know what's going on. And a big part of restorative practices is that it's not just the student at the end that's a part of repairing harm. It is about inviting the families, the family of that student, the families of the ones that were harmed, and having it be a larger context so that everybody understands about what the behavior was, what we don't expect of you anymore, and how we're going to solve this moving forward.
So when you talk about SPED kids, it's not just SPED kids, it's the whole population?
Absolutely. That's part about that know better, do better. What got us cited was the special education data, but we realized that we know better and we can do better with all of our students.
And being a SPED student, how do they receive this restorative practice from a special needs standpoint versus the other population?
Special education students get everything that general education students get. You're always a general education student first, and so they are a part of this kind of they get the same thing that everybody else gets, as far as how their teacher works with them, and about how we also work with them.
And how do they receive that? Because I know being a SPED child, the receiving and understanding surely is different than general. And I mean, how do you see that? Is it working? Is it harder, more difficult? Is it really impacting them? Is the system for them working like it does in the general?
I don't see a difference as far as with our special education students. It's usually about how far in crisis you are, whether you're special education or your regular education. And so the amount of attention that you get If it's moving up to a counselor, restorative interventionist, those kinds of things, everybody benefits from those people that have the expertise.
And the children understand that they're going through a process of punishment
We
restorative?
Yeah, and yes, absolutely, because that's an important part of how you will learn how to do better and to re-enter into a classroom, is because that is part of the process, is you need to understand what we expected of you, where it went wrong, and how we can all work together to fix it.
Thank you.
Benavides? So I think what you're asking is a child with a significant disability, because we have a big umbrella in special ed. We have kids who are in special ed who have speech therapy because they can't say an R sound, all the way to kids who are severe and profound and medically fragile and have a nurse in their classroom, and everything else in between. And so someone with a significant disability would not probably go to the restorative center, and they probably also are not getting in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, and DAEP placements. But kids with more skills, those are the kids that would be treated just like any other gen ed student would, and would have an opportunity to go. And yes, they would understand the process because they have more skills.
Mr. Ramos.
Really not much of a question, I guess just a comment. I don't know if any of the trustees, I had the pleasure to tour. I don't know if any of the trustees have toured these campuses, but I had the pleasure of touring Mary Huey and Mary Grimes, and like during just a regular classroom setting, and just my hats off to the staff that are there. It's a lot of work, and a lot of these students that are there do require a lot of special needs. And so my hats off to everybody in that department. Thank you.
Mr. Eric?
I just wanted to make the comment that I know we're focusing on secondary, but I think it's important to note that these are all interventions that we are starting early on, because without early teaching of these practices, it doesn't help us to just teach the kids once they get to middle school and high school that this is what restorative practices are. As a district, and correct me if I'm wrong, we've started this all the way down to pre-KK.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that I was going to just go back to, the 5 that drive restorative practices. That's the entire district, and in the 5 that drive, that also points us towards that every year we don't have to come up with something new. What every year we need to do is make sure everybody new that joins CFB ISD knows what restorative practices are and how to do them well. And then everyone who comes back every other year, we don't give you the same professional development over each year. We make sure and deepen your understanding so that you're able to support our students even in a better way.
Anyone else have questions or comments? I do have just a couple of questions and a comment that I'd like to make, and I guess I'll ask the questions first. And I'm really just wanting to know, well, I'll preface it by saying on page 3 of the report, the slide on the right that shows the classroom removals by ethnicity, it just says classroom removals. If you flip to page 7, we've got percent of discretionary removal rate, and then on the next page it's total, which includes discretionary and mandatory, and I think I know what that means, but I'm not sure everybody in the room does, and I was wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about what kind of removals are included in the chart on page 3, and generally what the difference between discretionary and mandatory removals are. What do those look like in practice, just so that we're all on the same page?
Definitely. So when we were looking at discipline, once again, we took it and looked overall. All discipline, all students across the district, and we really began to narrow and look at it and develop a root cause analysis based on 2018-19. So on slide 3, we can see the discipline removal rates in terms of ethnicity, and this is all removals, any discipline. Some of it could be, as mentioned before, a discretionary placement. A removal would be tardies, no IDs, skipping, it's the 3rd time. That's a discretionary removal. That's included in slide 3, as well as pushing, shoving in the hallway. Still a little on the discretionary side there, right? But fighting, that's not a discretionary. fighting will get you removed from the classroom. And based on the incidents, it could be in school, out of school, DAP placement. So on slide 3, we have all removals, all discipline that year based on ethnicity. Now, if we take a look at slide 7, the next part is we looked at it all across the board, right? Anything and everything related to removal. Slide 7 this is focusing on the discretionary, that a decision was made to remove the student into in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, and DAP. It could be the strike 3 year out type of thing. Students repeating certain things, and it's like, you know what, we're gonna do that timeout. It's in-school suspension. What restorative practices has done is given us the proactive place in between that. Instead of strike 3, you're immediately out. It gives you, what's the root cause? What's going on in this? What's causing some of that misbehavior and things that we can address? So slide 7 was those discretionary type of behaviors, things where kids are not really in compliance. Then when we take a look at slide 8, recall that our significant disproportionality was based on student removal of our SPED students. So our slide 8 was looking at, we've created a strategic goal that we want those removal rates to more closely represent our student population served by special education. So we started at the largest scale, narrowed it down to look at the discretionary. Slide 8 is looking specifically at our SPED population. Now on slide 8, it does include non-discretionary as well, mandatory. So that is once again taking a look at all of our SPED students over those years. Our next report, we will not receive this data from the state until the fall of this year.
So is it fair to say that the majority of the discretionary removals will be in-school and out-of-school suspensions as opposed to expulsions and
exactly.
DAPs, placements? And so most of those would be what we call mandatory, in other words, specified by Texas Education Code.
Exactly. As that was also part of the review process that they put into discipline, as well as consistency across the campuses with that shared language of same systems and trying to bring that into place across all of our campuses.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to make the comment, number one, just to thank you guys for tackling this. This is obviously, when you look at the slide on page 3, it's a problem. When you see 17% of kids comprising 33% of the removals, we need to rethink what we're doing, and it's just one of those difficult issues that as you solve one problem, often we create new problems, and so you just always, it's just a matter of continuing to work with it and keep your eye on the ball and keep that ultimate goal of making sure we're doing things equitably within the district. And, the goal is, what we get cited for is the number of removals, but as several of my colleagues have mentioned tonight, the goal is improved behavior. And that's really the only metric we have for the number of removals. So I would also encourage, as we go on, and maybe some of the survey work we're doing can help with this, trying to come up with some other metrics to understand if as referrals continue to decrease, which I hope and trust they will, that we'll also see increased levels of satisfaction with the environment in the classroom. So, but thank you for all this hard work. I know, and congratulations on the positive, the gains that we've seen in this area, and getting out from underneath the eye of the state on this issue I think is a good thing and deserves to be celebrated. So, thanks to all of y'all for the work you did. Okay, I've been told that the next agenda item 4E is a rather lengthy presentation, and it's been suggested maybe we take a break before we move to 4E. So it is right now 7:54. Why don't we take an 8-minute break and put us back here at 8:02.
You're good to go. There's that. And we're set.
knew that.
You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I just,
I think that's critical.
well, I think, you know, one of the things. This meeting of the Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD Board of Trustees is called back to order at 8:03 p.m. Our next agenda item is 4E, House Bill 3 revisions. Dr. West, I will turn it over to you.
There we go. For third grade reading, third grade math, and college and career military readiness. Due to an interrupted school year, which resulted in no STAR testing in 2020, followed by interrupted learning for our students, which included at-home learning, remote and traditional learning, quarantines, etc., across 2020 through 2022, CFB-ISD's teaching and learning team convened committees to establish proposed revisions to the HB3 board goals. Updated goals are being shared with trustees this evening and will be presented for possible adoption at the March board meeting. This presentation was initially built for a work study format, thus it is longer than our usual presentations. HB3 goals are important to you, to us, and to our CFB-ISD community, so prepare yourself for a thorough presentation that includes many of my colleagues. As mentioned previously, our district's board goals were introduced in the spring of 2020 and focused on early childhood literacy, math, as well as college, career, and military readiness. That 5-year target for grade 3 reading and math were based on STAR performance from the 18-19 school year and were established prior to the pandemic. Since then, education across the globe has been hindered by school shutdowns, virtual learning, quarantines. As a result, schools across the state have had many obstacles that precluded all of us from meeting or exceeding the goals that we set. TEA shared the following information with districts in November. STAR testing began in 2012 and it was interrupted only once in 2020 when testing was canceled across the state due to the COVID-19 pandemic. These graphs show overall performance rate on reading, math, STAR tests across 10 years. Historically, students in Texas have made slight gains each year. However, the negative impact of COVID-19 erased years of improvement in both of these subjects. As you can see from the graphs across the state of Texas, the negative impact erased years of improvement in reading and math. Specifically, reading scores were reverted back to where the state was in 2017, while math scores were reverted back to where they were in 2013. Note that TEA is also working on a reset. The reset you will hear about from our team tonight is intended to keep us moving forward as a district through setting reasonable and stretch goals. This slide speaks for itself. Note that number 3 reads, create board alignment with and in support of district goals. As a board, you have supported our efforts as we've navigated a pandemic. Tonight's conversation is intended to update you on the work we are doing to close gaps that were previously defined in HB3 and also to accelerate unfinished learning caused by a pandemic. The first team who will share with you tonight will be addressing the elementary reading and math. Tracy Smith, Assistant Superintendent. Maggie De La Rosa, Chief of School Leadership. I'm going to have each of them raise their hand if they're back there. Yes. Susan Machayo, Chief of School Leadership. Carolina Christensen, Director of Elementary Bilingual and ESL. Whitney Hartman, Director of Elementary Mathematics. Susan Kelly is not able to be here tonight, but she participated as well. She's the Director of Elementary Language Arts. Dr. Patty Parker, Director of Assessment and Accountability. And Shashawn Campbell, Coordinator of Student Performance. I will now turn this presentation over to Carolina Christensen.
Thank you, Dr. West. You have seen the visual that was created this year to show the coherence of the work being done in CFB. While the visual was developed and adopted this year, it shows the strategies we have been working towards since 2019 when the board goals were adopted. As we can see, all the pillars support Tier 1 instruction, whole group instruction on level standards for all students. The pillars represent the big rocks that allow us to support every student access to Tier 1 instruction and standards. The base of the visual represents how we will support high achievement for all. For those of you with longevity on the board, you'll remember that when we presented the HB3 goals, we also presented a comprehensive 5-year plan for each content area. The plan contains strategies identified to help the district reach the outlined goals. Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Hartman would like to share the strategies that have been carried out to build a firm foundation for student achievement.
Good evening. Ms. Kelly is sorry that she couldn't be here, so I'm bringing her words to you tonight. On the next slides, you'll see the strategies the ELA department is using to ensure our kindergarten through 3rd grade students are meeting grade level expectations. I'd like to highlight a few of the strategies that we think are particularly impactful. The teacher matters. A skilled teacher makes all the difference in student achievement. We build teacher capacity through professional learning communities, studying data and student work, as well as studying essential standards in upcoming reading and writing units. We offer ongoing professional development around our workshop model. This structure provides teachers with opportunities to teach students in small groups, meeting individual needs as well as providing students with the opportunity to read and write independently. In light of what we learned in the Texas Reading Academies and the science of teaching reading, we focused for the past 2 years on foundational skills. Our ELA coaches are instrumental in building capacity in our staffs. They observe lessons and provide feedback, help teachers set goals for student achievement, and analyze data. We believe that one of the most powerful things that we have done to improve student achievement is develop district common formative assessments. These assessments help us determine whether students have learned what we've taught. And since they're formative, teachers have time to reteach skills when necessary. We know that students who attend pre-K come more prepared for kindergarten. Our coordinator of early learning, Sandy Meyer, has done an outstanding job building capacity in our pre-K teaching staff. We've adopted a new pre-K curriculum and continue to help teachers implement that curriculum. We've also implemented standards-based report cards at pre-K and kindergarten, and this year, a committee of teachers, coaches, and directors are developing similar report card for 1st grade that will be implemented next year. This type of reporting ensures consistency in grading from teacher to teacher and campus to campus, as well as ensures a focus on how well a given student performs against a grade level standard. Also, we want to thank the board, as this year we were fortunate to be able to have a special education coach dedicated to building capacity for our special education teachers. Mrs. Hartman will share the work of the mathematics department.
Thank you, Tracy. Transitioning to our math plan today, you will see similar focal points as ELA as we have worked together as a team to uplift the most effective strategies for increasing student achievement. For example, we know that sustainable progress takes the efficacy of the whole group, which we like to call professional learning communities. Our main focus of professional development this year has been to develop high-functioning teams of teachers through our guiding PLC principles. In holding tight to our PLC principles, we ensure that our material is taught to the rigor of the state standard, that we have assessments in place that are aligned to the standard, and most importantly, we have strategies in place to respond to students' individual needs. We've also provided ongoing training for our Number Corner curriculum. Number Corner is a robust spiral review curriculum done daily with students. Teachers who implement this program with fidelity have reported its positive impact on their classrooms. Also in CFB, we promote the Math Workshop framework. Math Workshop is a student-centered framework that offers flexibility in how students spend work time. With this framework, it provides choice in student work time activities, and it also provides more opportunities for teachers to pull and provide small group instruction. Most importantly, the students are spending the majority of the class doing the thinking and the talking. We know that learning is accelerated through access and high-quality Tier 1 instruction, and the Math Workshop framework ensures that this happens. In CFB, we understand the value that data adds to our House Bill 3 plan. We have established an aligned assessment system through our district common formative assessments to ensure that the data collected gives us information we need to maintain progress. These assessments are focused on the essential standards or those concepts and skills most critical to a student's current grade level and beyond. We also utilize our data-driven instruction philosophies and protocols on both summative and formative assessments, and this helps us monitor student progress and, most importantly, advance student achievement. Our teachers are our most important asset in CFB, and that's why we believe in systems of observation and feedback and coaching. The instructional coaches have had ongoing gym night coaching training. This research-based coaching framework is centered around student achievement and engagement. The research is clear that when we set goals around student achievement and we work towards those goals with teachers, our instructional practices become more effective as a result. The success of all students is our top priority. Offering multi-tiered systems of support provides differentiated learning pathways to meet the unique needs of our learners. Currently, we're able to support staff in responding to these unique needs through coaching. So we have our coordinator of early learning, our early mathematics coaches, our precious special education mathematics coach, diligently partnering and supporting teachers to create plans to meet the needs of their learners. And lastly, having a guaranteed and viable Tier 1 curriculum is the foundation of increasing student achievement. We've recently revised our scope and sequence to focus on our essential standards throughout the year. This ensures, again, that our state standards are not only taught to their entirety, but that students have opportunities to practice and to develop a really deep understanding of their grade level content. Number Corner is an essential asset to our kinder through second grade for our second grade teachers. And we were able to purchase Bridges intervention kits to serve our students with learning gaps. This has been a key resource for teachers to use in providing aligned intervention for our students. So, turn it back to Tracy.
So with all that work that we have already started, with COVID and the things that have gone along with our COVID gaps, it still hasn't quite been enough. So as you know, at one of the meetings that we met together with you all, we were saying that we want to meet the goals that were originally set, but that we thought that we needed to do a reset. So I'm here tonight to just share a little bit with you about the thinking that went behind what we are sharing with you tonight. So in front of you, you will see a slide, this one for grade 3 reading, that shows you the past few years of STAR data. So our committee has been working for over a month to really look at where are we, where do we need to go, how do we set a goal for a land that we really are just trying to figure out and get back to normal. So with that, we took a look at where the state was, so you'll see that in the first column, and also where the district was since 2017. We didn't go back further than that as the metrics were different and wouldn't have gained any insight into what we're looking at. So with that, we saw, well, do we start with 2019 and say, let's start from 43% and move forward? Do we take into account 2021, where our scores obviously came back lower? Do we do a combination of all of those? So what we did was we pulled the data not only for the district as a whole, but for every campus, every elementary campus in CFB. And we looked at where are the campuses, where do we want them to be, how do we move forward? What we finally decided upon was to take the 2019 scores, because we wanted rigorous goals to share with you and not just something that we say, oh, without any work, we can do this, because we know that's not what we want, it's not what our students deserve. So we said, let's think about starting with 2019, and it's not, you can't see my cursor moving, I'm sorry about that. I don't have any other way to show you. But let's start with 2019 with a 43% and say, what if we made a 3% gain over that by the year 2024? Although that doesn't seem like much, it really is, as we are really at the 2021 level of 36%. So what we did was we said, okay, if we were to say 46% and walk our scores up from the 2021 score of 36%, then we would be setting a goal of 39% for this year, 42% the year after that, and then finally getting to the 46% that we have put in front of you. You can also see, just for easy comparison, where we originally set the goal at 55%. So that's where we started with our overall goal as a whole. We also looked at each sub-pop because we are not only interested in helping our students as a whole to get where they need to go, we want every student and every sub-pop to move forward as well. So we took a look at all of those sub-pops and said, let's follow that same process. So we started with, I'm taking a look at the African American population since it's first. We were at 30% in 2019. So if we added 3% points to that, we'd end up with a goal of 2024, 33%. But then we went back to 2021 because it's lower and walked up our goal from 25% to 33% with a gain of about 2 to 3 points each year in getting to that overall goal of 33%. We followed that with each of the areas except you can see American Indian. American Indian, you'll notice we were at 44%. The asterisk in 2021 meant in third grade we did not have enough students for that data to count. However, we didn't want to omit that subgroup because we did have enough students back in 2019, so we wanted to set goals with them. It's really difficult to determine what that might be, so we just did a 1 percentage point gain for that subpopulation. We did not put a goal for Pacific Islander because we have not had anything to even begin to start a goal. You'll see in economically disadvantaged that we have highlighted that yellow because not only did our committee say that we wanted to set a stretch goal for us for the overall student group as a whole, we said we wanted to set a stretch goal for one subpopulation. So we had lots of discussion about which subpopulation that should be. And we determined that the best subpopulation to think of was our economically disadvantaged. The rationale for that is that we have economically disadvantaged students who are African American, who are Hispanic, who are white, who are Asian, who are special ed. And so increasing the scores and really targeting our economically disadvantaged students would have an indirect impact or a direct impact on our students across the district. So that is our stretch goal. And how did we come up with a stretch goal and how did we come up with 3%? 3%, if we had our statistician, Dr. Patty Parker, standing up here, she would tell us that when you look at the data across the district as a whole, 3 to 5% is a good goal. It is a stretch goal. So we went we went 6% in economically disadvantaged, and that's why we consider it a stretch goal, over that 3 to 5%. And again, hoping that it will, and hope isn't a strategy, believing that it will impact all of our other areas as well. So then we take a look at the math goal. We use the same logic to help us to determine what we wanted to bring to you tonight. So again, we looked at where are we in 2019, where are we in 2021, and we again wanted to say 3% from 46 to 49 in 2024. So we then said we wanted to walk those goals up, starting at the 25% in 2021. Notice in reading, we needed only to grow about 2 to 3 points per year. In math, we're looking at more of a 7 to 8% point increase. However, Our math team was a part of this decision-making, and in fact, probably leading it with, yes, we can, because if you know Ms. Hartman, she is extremely positive and not only thinks, but knows that we can get there. So we again did the same walking up of every sub-pop, 3 percentage points. So you'll see the increases there between 2019 and 2024, with once again us looking to economically disadvantaged as our stretch goal. So we want to get our economically disadvantaged, again, helping every sub-pop to be able to make the gains that they need.
Okay, so what are our next steps? We know that we have the right structures in place, so now our work centers around improving those practices. There's no quick fix. It takes time to deepen our understanding. This summer, we will lead professional development around PLCs. Having strong Tier 1 instruction is the foundation for all learners. Therefore, we will continue our work to strengthen Tier 1 instruction through the work we are already doing with professional learning communities. The culture that we have in CFB is one that makes us proud. We support our newest professionals, beginning with their New Hire Academy. At the end of this academy, new hires understand that they have a multi-tiered system of support and that they are not in this work alone. How will we know if what we are doing is resulting in closing our opportunity gaps? Both informal and formal assessment data drive our instructional decisions, which is why we will continue to study and implement the 7 strategies of formative assessment. To sum it up, as a professional learning community, we will continue to study a little, teach a little, assess a little, and adjust as necessary. Observation and feedback is an integral part of improving Tier 1 instruction, and it is the cycle that we utilize to improve everyone's practice. Our next step in this process is to improve the teacher-student feedback cycle through goal setting and formative assessment. Having a multi-tiered system of support is not only necessary to provide interventions to students below grade level, it also provides extensions for our advanced learners. These extensions will be included in our K-1 curriculum next school year. We are continuing to improve our guaranteed and viable curriculum through cross-curricular integration and vocabulary development.
Good evening. We're very familiar with this image of equality versus equity as we work to meet students where they are by allocating support and opportunities as needed to create equal outcomes for all students. In the first image, it is assumed that everyone will benefit from the same support. They are being treated equally. In the second image, individuals are given different supports to make it possible for them to have equal access to the game. They are being treated equitably. In the third image, all 3 can see the game without any supports or accommodations because the cause of the inequity was addressed. The systemic barrier has been removed. With this mindset, the chiefs of school leadership and assistant superintendents will have the opportunity to meet with their respective campus leaders to identify the needs of the campus to set SMART goals. Now you're asking, what is a SMART goal? A SMART goal is specific, what exactly needs to be achieved. It's measurable. How will you track your progress? It's achievable. Is the goal a reasonable stretch? It's realistic. Is the target challenging but realistic? And it's time-bound. What is the target date to achieve the goal? With the support of the chiefs of school leadership and the assistant superintendents, each campus administrator team will set SMART goals based on the needs of the campus. Defining these parameters with each individual campus will ensure that campuses are addressing the individualized needs of their students. Recognizing that one size does not fit all, campuses will have 3 options to reset the board goals. Based on the review of STAR performance pre-COVID and the most recent administration of STAR in 2021, learners at our campuses have different needs. Through review of campus-level data and development of SMART goals, some principals may follow the same reset process as the district, revising their grade 3 board goals based on 2019 STAR scores. Some principals may opt to use the 2021 STAR results as a basis for their reset, as slight gains did occur for some student groups. And finally, others may choose to keep the original board goal for 2024. For example, in the area of reading, but may revise in the area of mathematics based on the 2019 STAR scores. To help close the performance gap, all campuses will also create a targeted stretch goal for specific student groups in the areas of reading and in the area of mathematics. I will now turn over the presentation to Dr. Hamlin.
Similar to the work completed by our elementary committee, a secondary committee was assigned to review performance data across the 8 reportable CCMR indicators in CFB and potential revisions to previously established House Bill 3 CCMR board goals. The following are the members of the secondary CCMR task force: Dr. Dana West, myself, Joe Gillen, Chief of SEL and Post-Secondary Readiness, Ken Enslow, Coordinator of CCMR. Show that, that'd be good. Katie Bourne, Coordinator of CTE, Melanie Williams, Coordinator of School Counseling and AVID, and Dr. Patty Parker, Director of Assessment and Accountability. And the whole team is here tonight. They will be, right? Oh, they're not here tonight. I'm sorry. It's going to be me tonight. But the experts are not here. They couldn't be here. They would love to be here because they're so passionate about their work that they just couldn't be here tonight. As reported by Dr. West, our district's board goals for college, career, and military readiness were implemented prior to COVID learning disruptions. The original approved goal delineated a 10% increase in overall CCMR by August 2024 and was based on review of prior performance, specifically 2019 annual graduates, and projections for strategic planning initiatives. COVID learning disruptions hindered progress of both established and new CCMR initiatives due to school closures, virtual learning, and quarantines. During and immediately following these disruptions, CCMR indicator performance percentages have declined and implementation of strategic plan initiatives were delayed. To identify a revision recommendation based on these results, it is important to note where we have been. Prior CCMR success was the result of forward-thinking, hard work by both district and campus staff. Organized within the 5 That Drive, there are several highlights that have contributed to student and district success since the approval of House Bill Board goals. Regular meetings have been established to ensure that interdepartmental perspectives are included in CCMR planning, discussions, and to allow for collaboration with other districts and partners. Our district culture promotes building multiple opportunities for student success, and from district-created assessment prep to CTE realignment to the addition of college credit programming, students have many paths to meeting CCMR. CCMR is data-driven by nature, and the department shares and interprets CCMR performance results with campuses and district staff. Student feedback is critical. There are multiple structures that support students with information about their assessment results. There are also multiple roles specifically focused on providing multi-tier CCMR support to campus staff, students, and parents that did not exist before. Finally, through CCMR guides, advisory lessons, CTE, and district events, CCMR has its own curriculum set and delivery models. These initiatives started when the CCMR accountability was still relatively new and were extremely valuable to initial reporting results. We have proudly reported that before learning disruptions, CFB outperformed the region and state in overall CCMR. Prior to the 2020, CFB was in the early stages of implementing plans for multiple indicator areas before learning disruptions began, specifically targeting TSI criteria, on-ramps, dual credit, and industry-based certifications. When reviewing performance of 2021 annual graduates, which will not be officially reported until this fall, overall CCMR is projected to be off track at 65%. Until official TA reporting is released, we will not know the direct impact on performance of our comparison districts, but CFB projection falls 8 percentage points below our prior year and 8 percentage points below our established goal. Projecting the positive impact of initiatives along with the effects of the learning disruptions across 8 measurable indicators requires a lot of context. It is especially important to note that the attendance, both reported attendance and actual participation, with 50% of our secondary students still learning remotely at the end of the last school year, had a tremendous impact on data and progress projections towards CCMR outcomes. However, clear trends both before and immediately after hybrid learning can be found in TSI criteria data, which is our highest performance indicator and our most accessible and comparable data points across cohorts. Focusing within the TSI criteria, which also includes 2 of the 3 board goal progress measures, we specifically reviewed PSAT and SAT data for our current 9th through 11th graders in comparison to prior cohorts. We recommend the yearly target goal for the cohort 2021 students be reset back to the same goal that was established for our cohort 2019 graduates. By revising the final House Bill 3 goal to 75%, we are still seeking a 2 percentage point increase each year with an overall increase of 6 percentage points. The final goal would still exceed our all CCMR percentages earned prior to COVID learning disruptions. To meet the revised goal, monitoring performance improvements from returning to in-person learning will be very important. We will also plan to resume implementation of previously identified strategic initiatives and adapt new initiatives to promote overall CCMR growth in multiple areas. Here are some of our next steps to assist us in meeting the revised board goals. CCMR will focus on professional development that educates staff about specific aspects of CCMR and reinforces our collaborative meeting structures. We will build our culture to increase connections between CCMR, post-secondary planning, and what students are required to do in the classroom. We will improve our use of data by addressing our current data system processes, moving forward with the new data dashboard platforms, and increasing data to action initiatives. Feedback will become more intentional than just school reporting, but utilizing more frequent student survey data to respond to student needs more directly. Multi-tiered support includes expanding CCMR interventions through more individualized CCMR initiatives, increased access to personalized prep resources, additional CTE opportunities, and updates to our college credit programming. CCMR guides, advisory lessons, and SAT prep program will be updated annually, and implementation of our career exploration tools in Zello will be emphasized as a priority. We will also review the delivery model for CCMR content to students in grades 9th through 12th. I will now turn it over to Dr. West to close out tonight's presentation.
Tonight, we presented the background on development of the board goals and proposed revisions. And we also wanted you to know that we're going to bring forth consideration of approval for resetting House Bill 3 board goals at the March 3rd board meeting. Looking ahead to next school year, we've established 4 quarterly reports as described on this slide. Our team appreciates the opportunity to share with you how the 5 that drive is shaping our work. The HB3 reset numbers that we shared with you tonight were developed through a collaborative process with the intention
of creating reasonable goals that would challenge campuses, teachers, students without feeling unrealistic or unreachable. We believe the work we are doing will positively impact student outcomes, yet this work is daunting. As mentioned on the previous slide, we'd like to add that the revised HB3 board goals as an action item for possible adoption at the board meeting, and we also at this time appreciate any questions, thoughts, or suggestions you have regarding this important work. I think it's important to note at this time also is that whether we leave the board goals the same or whether we revise them, you need to know that all of us and especially our teachers are out there worrying about every single student by name and need. And I know just seeing the work that I've seen from being on campuses are looking at data and getting students to tutorials and the right kinds of supports that they need, like probably never before. I don't know, CFB is pretty amazing, so I don't know what before looked like, but I'm going to tell you what it's looking like now is very pleasing to me. So thank you again for your support, and this entire team, they better not have run away. They're all available to step back to the microphone.
Thank you all. Questions, comments from the board? Ms. Derrick.
I have one for Ms. Smith. The slides that you presented, page 13 and 14.
Yes, ma'am.
So it was the very bottom line that said prior House Bill 3 targets.
Yes,
Was
ma'am.
that originally going to be like in the 2024 line?
That was what the board approved back in 2017. So
As
yes.
the 2024 numbers?
Yes.
Okay, okay,
Yes.
just making sure that I visually knew where that should have fit in. Okay.
Yes.
And then I just have a general question. I don't know who this belongs to, but, obviously this is, if we approve this in March, this is work that trickles down to staff. Are we getting feedback from staff, like at a campus level? Is the administration there presenting these proposals to them to say, okay, do we feel good about this? I just want to make sure that staff knows about it and feels like this is doable before a bunch of people sitting up here make that decision for them.
We have shared this with principals and solicited their feedback on it. We have not gone to the campus level to do that because each campus will set its own individual goals. So that was what Ms. De La Rosa was sharing with
Yes.
you, that the chiefs and/or Dr. Hamlin and I will sit down with each of our campuses and say, okay, here's where it is. We have 3 options for you. But each scenario, when we started looking at it and we played with setting goals for everybody. Not that we would ever tell the campuses what they had to do. We would work with them. But we just said, if it was us, what would it look like? And so in that, we realized that you can't have a cookie cutter type of application for them. So that's why we came up with 3 scenarios as a starting point, and then the campus principal will be able to work with the staff and with their school leader, Maggie, Susan, Lance, or me, to set those goals.
So those campus administrators were involved in the discussion about giving them 3 options?
Not that part, no.
Oh, okay,
No,
okay.
just with what we did here, and did they feel good about the walking up of the goals and starting with 2019?
Okay, and we feel confident that they're going to be in support of this?
I do, and here's why. They, as we shared with you all before, the reason we even entered into this conversation was because of the stress that people felt about these numbers. And again, whether we change the numbers or not, we're going to work as hard as we can to do the best for our students. But the numbers seem to be clouding the conversation with our staff, and we're like, let's not let the numbers cloud the conversation. Let's let the individual knowing students by name and need be the focus.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Shackman.
Thank you, Dr. Black. Ms. Smith, you probably can answer that. It's a question that I have as we think about making changes in the numbers and in our goals, because when we first did this in 2017, we were unaware that they're about to change STAR. first of all, when's the change coming? And is that taken into account in these goals? Because we don't even know what cut scores will be, any of the stuff.
The STAR scores will change in 2 years, the criteria, et cetera. So that's one reason we didn't want to set a 5-year goal. We didn't want to go past 2024 because it will be meaningless and we won't know whether we really got there or not.
Okay,
So
so-
that's why we stopped at 2024. And also just a reminder to the board, I neglected to say it when I did my presentation, that these are based on the meets and master scores, not just on the barely meeting the minimum. So it is a lofty standard, even though you see numbers like 4633, it's at the meets and masters level, which means students have gotten many, 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 many questions correct on a very rigorous test.
Good, thanks. Good luck planning for all that.
We're
So-
working every day.
So these numbers don't represent what we would call pass rates traditionally. This is
Correct.
students doing very well and extremely well, the top two. Okay. Ms. Urbacek.
On those 3 options, I really do like that. I mean, I think to your point, it gives, like you said, each campus to decide what's best for them and that they could split, reading, math, and on the close the gap. I mean, that might be different, that's different at every one of our schools. I mean, I like this, so I think that's a great option for them. And then I did want to comment on the CCMR. I think this is all extremely important, especially for our students that might be on that, a wonderfully different path than college, as a choice. And I think the efforts are fabulous. I think the programs and again, the improvements that we've made in our facilities are just going to drive that participation and support these goals. And then the efforts of the CCMR deans. I have personally been dogged, chased by a CCMR dean, and my fault. I was close to missing a deadline, but I can attest that they are monitoring, they are following up, and I get a very detailed email with information, and I feel informed about what's going to happen, and so those improvements alone, it's fabulous, and I think it makes a difference for all students.
Thank you. I'm just going to chime in there and just say that, yes, when you see the work that they're doing, and with Ken Enslow leading the way there, it's been phenomenal. And just the amount of information that he shared with the principals on a monthly basis, they know exactly where they're at. And then when you bring up IBCs, those industry-based certifications, when you can go to any one of our high schools and you have an opportunity to have anywhere from 20 to 30 different opportunities to have some type of certification, it's huge. And we're looking to even grow that and make it more robust. So.
Yeah, and you mentioned the parent involvement, and so I just want to, attest that there's parents are involved, kept engaged and informed and chastised, maybe. So.
Any other comments or questions from board members? Ms. Hatfield.
Thank you all for the tireless work that you did to try to come up with this and really think through the details, because we have a lot of work to do, and it's very evident that everyone's very focused on a goal. I find it interesting that the math goals are so much more drastic than the reading, and I'm just wondering if we have any map data yet that shows that there's a reason to have that excitement. You look so excited.
So we wrapped up this work before our middle of the year map test came out. And not only are we on track to meet the 2022 goal, we're on track to surpass it. So currently we're on our third graders are on track to have 40% at the meets grade level. And our stretch goal was 27%, I believe, for economic disadvantage. Can I go back, or next slide? There we go, 27%, and we're currently projected to have 30%. So what's also important to remember with these goals is that this isn't cohort data. This doesn't follow our current third graders to fourth grade and then to fifth grade. So we have a year and a half to get our second graders to our next goal. And our current students, it's very humbling to set a third grade school for a 7-year-old. They don't have a 7-year learning gap. They haven't been alive for 7 years. So we're noticed they only know school as COVID school. Last year was their first year in kindergarten, and they show up every day and they love their teachers and they're ready to learn. And so I not only think it's doable, I feel like the revisions were out of necessity only because of all the interrupting learning that continues to happen. But this is our minimal goal. We look forward to passing it. And to even think about that in a bigger picture, we set the 2024 goal originally for this group of kids when they were 2 years old. So, yes, we can totally do it.
Any other comments, questions? Well, I would like to thank the whole team for not only for the presentation, but for the work you've been doing to recalibrate. It's I know this is a difficult conversation to have with educators, among educators, and I know none of you like adjusting any of those numbers downward because you are ambitious and you want the best for our kids. And so, but I think it was conversation that had to be had, and it sounds like you guys did it in a collaborative and meaningful way. So I congratulate you guys for that. And I will say, wherever the goals end up, I have a lot of confidence in the team out on the ground in these schools to get these kids to not only to meet but to exceed these goals, because I know what kind of talent we have out there. So thank you all. All right. That presentation didn't seem that long, Dr. Chapman. Okay. Let's move to our agenda item number 5, the consent agenda. The consent agenda is a mechanism that the board uses to approve a number of routine items together with a single vote. In compliance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, the public notice for this meeting includes the list of all consent agenda items, and the board has been provided ample information about these items in advance. Prior to any action taken on the consent agenda, board members may request withdrawal of individual items for clarification or discussion. So I'll ask board members at this time, are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda? Mr. Ramos.
I'd like to remove O and P, please.
O, P. Okay. So we have a motion to remove items O and P from the consent agenda. Are there any other items to be removed at this time? Mr. Bocek. Okay. Yeah. So no one, but you don't want to remove anything else. Okay. Ms. Hatfield, do you want to remove something else?
Remove 5E.
5E. So now we have requests to remove 5O, 5P, and 5E. Are there any further items that need to be removed from the consent agenda? Okay. We have removed items 5O, 5P, and 5E. Mr. Bocek, do you have a motion now?
We'll do it. I move that we approve the consent agenda items number 5A through D, items F through N, and we will exclude E, O, and P.
Okay, I have a motion from Mr. Bocek that we approve the consent agenda excluding items O, P, and E. Is there a second? Have a second from Ms. Derrick. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please show by raising their hand. Okay, I see 7 hands raised. Anyone opposed? No hands. So by a vote of 7-0, the motion carries. So we will now proceed to item 6A, which is to consider items that have been removed from the consent agenda. So we have O, P, and E. Do we need to consider these one at a time? Okay. Okay. So, Mr. Ramos, you asked for O and P to be removed. Would you like to make a motion?
No.
No? Oh, that's right. You're okay. Is there a motion regarding O and P?
I will make the motion that we approve agenda items O and P.
Okay. All right. I got it now. So I have a motion from Ms. Derrick. Do I have a second? A second from Mr. Shackman. Is there any discussion?
Yes, I'll be recusing myself on those.
Okay. Any other further discussion? All those in favor, please raise their hand. All those opposed? By a vote of 6 in favor, 0 against, and 1 recused, the motion to pass 5O and 5P carries. So we'll move on now to item 5E, which Ms. Hatfield has asked to be pulled from the consent agenda. Is there a motion regarding 5E? Ms. Derrick.
I move that we approve agenda item E as presented.
Okay. I have a motion that we approve item E as presented. Is there a second? I have a second from Mr. Bocek. Is there any discussion? Ms. Hatfield.
I'll just be recusing myself from that vote.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor of the motion, please show by raising your hand. All those opposed? By a vote of 6 in favor, 0 opposed, and 1 recusal, item E, 5E, carries. Motion to approve 5E. Okay. Let's see. So that brings us to agenda item 6, which is our items for discussion and or action. 6A, excuse me, we already did 6A, didn't we? 6B is to consider approve resolution of the board delegating authority to accept a contract employee's resignation. So this is Mr. Mersch.
Dr. Black, Dr. Chapman, members of the board, what you have before you is a resolution that would add additional employee-specific positions with the authority to officially accept a contract employee's resignation. So why is this needed, or why is this being brought to you? Recently, the Commissioner of Education passed a decision that says only the superintendent can officially accept a contract employee's resignation. So what's the effect of that? Well, there's an additional piece to that, which states that, for example, if an employee brings their resignation to HR, HR is relegated to tell that person they cannot accept it. They do not have the authority to accept it. It has to go to the superintendent's office. Then it can be officially accepted. Then it will be routed to HR. Then HR will schedule an appointment for the individual to come in to have it processed and to experience the HR offboarding. So what you have before you is a resolution. You have the authority to approve this that will allow additional employees the authority, like I said, to accept a contract employee's resignation. So what is being proposed that in that resolution is that you add the chief HR officer and that you add the HR directors and provide them the authority to officially accept a contract employee's resignation. The objective in this is to improve efficiency and to improve customer service, and is believed by reading this resolution in its entirety and approving it as presented, it will accomplish those objectives.
Thank you, Mr. Mersch. Before I ask for a motion, are there any questions board members have of Mr. Mersch? Yeah. Okay, Ms. Benavides first.
It being it goes in the order that you've shared, will it not go to the superintendent's office? Will he not be aware of this resignation?
Yes, they're all shared, but just from an efficiency standpoint, they will go straight into HR and be able to be processed. And like I said, they will be able to have the HR offboarding experience. But yes, the superintendent's always made aware of every one of them.
And know, too, that It's timeliness, because a lot of times when they're resigning, they're trying to get another job or they have a different job. It's that customer service piece. So I'm still going to be in the loop. But if you're just trying to get all of them in, that could be difficult.
Okay, thank you.
And I would like to add that if it's before the penalty date, the 45 days before the first day of instruction of the next year, it's unilaterally accepted by whoever that official is. And right now, it's Dr. Chapman. And by adding the additional positions in, it will add those individuals also. But in effect, you cannot deny the resignation.
Mr. Mersch, does this also expedite the process for a principal beginning to interview, posting positions and interviewing for positions? Does he have to have or she have to have an official resignation signed off before that process can start?
Yes, sir. The way the process is set up, we have to have the official resignation. It has to be entered into the system before that position can be freed up to be posted.
Okay. So it expedites the recruitment process?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Shackman, did you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Mersch, I know the answer because I know the efficiency you all have on this, but you said that the Commissioner of Education, so Mr. Morath, had said, and it could only be the superintendent. So just so for the minutes and to get onto the video, this is a process that allows and is allowed to go around his statement.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Any further questions from the board? Okay, I'll go ahead and ask whether or not there's a motion, but I'll point out that anyone making a motion on this must read the resolution in full if you're making a motion to pass. Ms. Urbacek?
Just making y'all aware. All right, are you ready? I move that we approve the resolution of the board delegating authority to accept a contract employee's resignation effective at the end of the school year or submitted before penalty-free resignation date. Whereas Education Code 21.105A, .160A, and .210A, and DFE local provide that a contracted employee may relinquish a teaching position and leave the district at the end of a school year without penalty by filing with the board or the board's designee a written resignation not later than the 45th day before the first day of instruction of the following school year. And whereas in addition to the delegation of authority to the superintendent in DFE local, the board seeks to also delegate authority to the chief human resources officer and human resources directors to accept a contract employee's written resignation effective at the end of the school year or submitted after the last day of the school year and before the penalty-free resignation date. Now, therefore, be it resolved that in addition to the delegation of authority to the superintendent in DFE local, the Board of Carrollton-Farmers Branch School District also delegates authority to the chief human resources officer and human resources directors to accept a contract employee's written resignation effective at the end of the school year or submitted after the last day of the school year and before the penalty-free resignation period. A resignation filed not later than the 45th day before the first day of instruction of the following school year is effective upon filing. The resignation cannot be rejected by the district or withdrawn by the employee, is accepted upon receipt by the superintendent or other person designated by board action, and requires no further action by the district. The authority granted by this resolution is effective until the board revokes such authority by further action. This will be adopted the 17th day of February 2022 by the Board of Trustees.
Thank you. I have a motion from Ms. Urbacek. Do I have a second? I have a second from Ms. Derrick. Is there any discussion? No discussion. Then I'd ask everyone in favor, please show by raising their hand. I see 7 hands raised. By a vote of 7 in support and no votes against, the motion carries. And we will move to the agenda item 6C, which is to consider and approve a resolution for emergency closure due to winter weather. So Dr. Chapman, this is you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And likewise, whoever makes the motion, please read this resolution in its entirety. So what are we asking for today? All of our certified employees are on days. So let's pick on a teacher is 187 days, right? If they do not come to school those 2 days, then they're at 185 days. If you pay them for those days without a resolution, that's gifting of public funds. So the teachers then have to make up that time during those bad weather days. Students are totally different. Students are on minutes, 75,600 minutes per year. We were able to get a waiver for our PD days, so we had the 2 banked days within our calendar. With the additional PD days, now we have 6.2 banked days for students. Again, students are different than employees. Students will not have to go because then we cut 2 off, we still have 4.2 banked days worth of minutes in our calendar. I need the Board of Trustees, or I'm asking the Board of Trustees that our staff not have to make up those 2 days by passing this resolution. And so in turn, we can still pay those individuals for those 2 days without them again having to make those days up on the 2 bad weather days that are listed in the calendar. We have no idea what the rest of the year holds, and I'm surely not going to hold my breath seeing what might happen. So I think in the safety of having those bad weather days still available, and for the good of our staff, which I think this will go, it'll help with morale, that you would approve this resolution tonight.
Are there any questions for Dr. Chapman related to this?
And just note, tomorrow we will make this very clear that students and staff, if approved tonight, will not be making those days up. Therefore, we will still have 2 bad weather days on our calendar if, when we get to those bad weather days, they're off.
If there are no questions, I will go ahead and ask whether or not anyone would like to make a motion. Again, the resolution must be read in full if you're making a motion. Ms. Hatfield.
You want it? Go for it.
Here we go.
Okay, so I have a motion from Ms. Herbacek. I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Okay, I move that we approve resolution of the Board of Trustees of Carrollton-Farmers Branch Independent School District for emergency closures due to winter weather, dated February 17th, 2022. Whereas from February 3rd through February 4th, 2022, severe winter weather was experienced in Dallas County and throughout the state of Texas. And whereas on February 2nd, 2022, County Judge Clay Jenkins declared a local state of disaster for Dallas County due to the severe winter weather. And whereas Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD, acting in the best interest of the health and safety of students and staff, ordered the emergency closures of all district facilities on February 3rd through February 4th, 2022. And whereas due to these circumstances, employees must miss work days during these closures. And whereas the Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD Board acknowledges that during an emergency closure, many district employees are instructed not to report for work, and other employees may be called upon to provide emergency-related services. And whereas the Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD Board finds that a need exists to address wage payments for employees who were idled and those who were required to work during emergency closures. And whereas the Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD's board policy DEA local states that during an emergency closure, the board may choose to pay employees for work days not scheduled to be made up later if authorization shall be by resolution or other board action. And whereas the superintendent or designee shall approve payments and ensure that accurate time records are kept of actual hours worked by non-exempt employees during emergency closure, whereas the Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD Board finds that it retains sufficient control over payment of employee compensation for the period of closure to ensure that such public purposes are accomplished, and whereas the Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD Board finds that it is in the best interests of Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD and that Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD will receive a return benefit from providing compensation during the closure. Now therefore be it resolved
that all the above referenced paragraphs are incorporated into and made part of this resolution, that it is hereby found, determined, and declared that emergency closures of all Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD facilities were a necessary and appropriate response to severe winter weather, and that eligible Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD employees shall be paid pursuant to their regular duty schedule for the time of the closure. The board hereby authorizes the superintendent to excuse absences of district employees and pay full compensation to employees as deemed appropriate to fulfill the purpose of this resolution. Resolved this the 17th day of February 2022.
Thank you, Ms. Bacek. We have a motion. Do I have a second? I see a second from Ms. Hatfield. Any discussion? Ms. Derrick.
Dr. Chapman, I thought of a question. What do we do about staff that had to work that day? Did we have staff that ended up having to work?
Do we know of any, Mr. Mersch, offhand?
I don't have the exact number. I can get that to you here momentarily. But the way the policy is set up and the way we're required to have that in policy is based on TASB in order for us to be able to get or be considered for reimbursement from the federal government or the state. And policy states that those individuals that were required to work, that were directed, mandated to work, received time and a half.
Yeah. Yeah, and we addressed that, back when we had the first freeze and we opened up Smith.
Yes,
We had all
remember
the
that.
workers come in and we paid them. So we would continue that same
Okay,
process.
and that'll be included in the communication tomorrow that
Yeah,
goes out to
yeah.
staff.
I just
Okay.
don't know how many, but we had
Th-
some.
it's- I don't need the number. I just
Oh,
wanted to
okay.
make sure we.
Oh,
they're-
absolutely.
I'm sure that happened and that we're taking care of them.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And and I want to say this real quick. I want to give them a shout out. Again, we had the storm a year ago this week, and we were one of the few districts that had 0 leaks, 0 damages. And again, this year, but it's because those workers are coming in and they're turning on the air and they're draining pipes. They're doing all of that pre-work for us in anticipation of even Malcolm, because he was frantically getting people working. We were filling up buses and vehicles, and they're putting the salt out just in case. Those folks were working. And so, yes, we will most definitely compensate them for that.
And I do have the number. There were a total of 330 hours worked over February 3rd and 4th of those individuals that were mandated to work.
A lot of work.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments, discussion? Okay. All those in favor, please show by raising their hand. I see 7 raised hands. All those opposed? I see none. So by a vote of 7 in favor and 0 opposed, the motion carries. So that brings us to agenda item number 7, comments from board members regarding posted agenda items. Board members, do any of you have comments you wish to make at this time related to the posted agenda? Okay, that brings us to agenda item number 8, which is adjournment. So we've reached the end of our agenda. We're adjourned at 9:11 p.m.